What is up, people? So we're gonna get it in, see what's going on. See who's in here today. See what's up to you guys. Sorry about the replay of the music because the dogs were barking, and hey, figured you didn't want to hear it. What's up, Sean Hawkins? Long time no see. What's up, Barney? What's up, RT96? What's up, B-Ball? What's up, Fred? What is up? Maxwell's in the house. What's up, GPS? Who else is here? Dominique, what's up? What's up, Militant Manny? And Kurt, what's up? All right, so like I said, gonna free flow today. Really, not too many things I wanted to definitely talk about 100%. Make sure I got into, but I definitely wanted to talk about. Let me get this up here real quick. Perfect. I definitely want to talk about observations that we make. Observations that we all make every day. Doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. This period. Now, excuse me. Now, one of the things that I wanted to preface is the fact that there's no difference in observation. And when I say that, it's not exactly what it's meant to say. So let me make it perfectly clear. But before I start that, how's my audio? I want to make sure the audio is good. That way we don't have to play that I can't hear you game. But more importantly, what I wanted to get at is the fact that, for instance, when we are at the beach and we see a boat start appearing to have obstruction due to the curvature of the earth, or as a flat earther would say, perspective, what we're seeing does not change. It's not a different observation. It's not a different view of what we're seeing. For instance, when a boat starts, from what I know it as, when a boat starts having obstruction from the bottom up and it's going further out, I'm seeing obstruction due to curvature, whereas a flat earther is going to tell you perspective. I know, but the realization is that boat is creating distance. That boat does have obstruction, and that's an observation. That is observation that both sides see. Period. The answers that are different are why we're seeing this. Now, whether or not you want to agree why it's happening, there's one aspect of these observations that come to play. The truth, the fact of what's happening. It's what it is. Our views, our opinions, our beliefs basically don't change any of this. So one of the things I've done before, and I thought maybe it would be a little bit more clear to people, more flat earth, that this is the issue I had with flat earth. The explanations for which the boat has obstruction, the reasonings for these, for instance, due to curvature, which is explained in many points, makes sense to me. It's something I can understand, something I can put into different situations and still come up with the same conclusion, whether it be different atmospheric conditions, whether it be different observational heights, does not matter. The globe, to me, explains it. Now, when we start going over to the flat earth side of how things work, how things are perceived, so to speak, a flat earther will tell you that the reason why that's happening is perspective. You can only see so far. The problem is what they'll want to show you is something like this. I'll go ahead and find it. I'll show you this. Trying to find the right picture. Let's do it this way. I'm grabbing it right now. Where is it? Note to self, stop putting everything in one spot or in different spots. Well, basically what I'm going to get at is the image that I was given or shown to by Free-Minded. I actually like the picture, so it kind of irritates me that he uses it. Let me see where it is. I have no idea where it's at. I know where it's at. Okay, let's do it this way. Let's see if it's in here. All right, I can't find it. Hang on one sec, guys. I'll just make it easier, and I'll just pull it up this way. So what I wanted to show you guys is this idea of that when the idea that perspective is a explanation for anything. It doesn't. It's not possible. It's not the way it works. It's not going to. Damn it! Where is it? Let me see. Ooh, I know where it is. All right, here. All right. Perfect. Found it. All right. So what I'll do is I'll share it this way. Put this here. All right. So this is, after a long awaited wait for you guys, my apologies, the image that I wanted to present. This one. This is the one that Free-Minded had shared with us. And what it does is it shows you the convergent line. It basically how our eyes work. It shows you, yeah, actually, let's do that. I see you in there, Travis. I'm gonna send you the link. That way we can, keep it civil, and we can also keep it one-on-one. Because again, I've been noticing that a lot lately, where so too many damn people can make a panel. Aggravating, I guess you would say. So I'm gonna go ahead and send you. I'll send you that link in Skype real quick, Travis, and then that way we can have a conversation about this. Because I know you have your perspective on how our eyes work and how we see things, and it'd be a little better if I had the other side. Because even then, this is one of those things when I was a flat earther that I didn't really see. There we go. All right, so I just put it in the Skype. First of all, I want to stop sharing. There we go. Yeah, Travis, so I just put the link in there right now, and then we'll go from there. But like I said, what I wanted to talk about was this fact that one, perspective isn't a description. It's not an explanation for anything. It's literally something that we do. So boats disappearing due to curvature isn't perspective. It's not the same thing as things converging. Because in the matter of converging, things are going to become smaller, smaller, and smaller, and disappear like a dot. That's what we would see if we looked down a hallway. That's what we would see if we looked, for instance, in, like the light we were just looking at. All those situations are the same. What's up, Travis? How you doing, my friend? How you doing? Doing pretty good, Just got off work, decided to go live and have a chat. I figured yeah. Well, it's always good to have. Okay, well, it's always good to have two different views on it. One of the things I actually would like to get your idea, your explanation, I guess you would say, where I see a boat disappearing due to curvature. Flat Earth would say perspective. Am I wrong in that analysis? Because, like I said, when I was a flat earther, it wasn't so much. I didn't really focus on a lot of different observations when it comes to these things like curvature or the stars, for instance. These are things I didn't really put into too much context in my life. I wish I had. Maybe I would have realized where we live a little bit sooner. But again, I know it to be due to curvature. What would be the explanation for yourself?
It can be isolated to one single thing in terms of all of the variables. So let's see how I can say this. I said this earlier on Jose's channel today when I think it was Alan Evans who took on the flip-flop show afterwards. He brought up some of these issues. He was talking with Chris Berry, and I jumped in because I wanted to just reiterate what Chris was saying. So it's not just perspective. Perspective is a part of it, but if we only talk about perspective at the expense of everything else, then we might as well be talking about orthographic view, because the orthographic view doesn't take into account the other variables either. So the other variables would be the air temperature, the water temperature, the humidity, the wind, things that I would label as the ether band. That is, ether in its generic, basic reference. If you just look it up on Wikipedia, the very first thing you're going to see is air. That's what the ether refers to. So I'm not being any more technical or any more controversial than that. And the band that I'm talking about is that area, however high it might reach. It depends on how far away you are. It could be an eighth of an inch off the horizon. It could be a quarter of an inch off the horizon. So whatever that band of refraction is, that's also a part of what happens when we watch a boat go into the distance, because we don't see it in a pristine environment. So it's not just perspective.
Okay, see. Okay. Well, I actually appreciate that, because the whole idea that it's just perspective is kind of aggravating.
Well, here's what I would say. It is only perspective if it's really close to you, because there comes a point when something is moving away from you that the ether band kicks in and then distorts what you're seeing. So it's both, because again, I've shot boats off the Chesapeake where they are a couple hundred yards offshore, and I can see them as clear as day, and I can see the hull where it meets the water line, and there's no distortion, there's no mirroring, there's no miraging or anything like that. But as it moves away from me, that clarity and that clarity begins to diminish, and the distortion begins to increase. And at that moment is when all hell breaks loose. And I don't think that we can claim the things that we want to claim with any accuracy. So the way that I've said it before, and I challenged Al K to that today, is let me say it this way. A year ago, September, I guess a year ago this month, I was in California, and I took my first shots of the Pacific Ocean with my P900. And as I was looking out, just fishing around, just seeing what I could see, I would look up with my naked eye. I would go back down to my camera, look up with my naked eye. The one thing I stood there and I sat there and I thought, there is no way in hell that if there were a curve, that I could ever say I'm watching the boat go over the curve. There's no way. No way. Even if I were a baller, I would have to say, yeah, I can't see that. There's no way.
Well, here's the thing. When you consider refraction or different, or we also say atmospheric optics, you're still not pinpointing what we're seeing. You're explaining things that would change the way we see it. But again, boats being obstructed by curvature, or having obstruction, we'll just say for right now, is an occurrence that happens regularly, depending, at different distances, depending on your elevation. But at the same time, something constantly makes it obstruct. Now, if it was atmospheric, if it different atmospheric conditions, then we would see something completely different, varying the condition.
I think that you need to. I think that you need to camp out on that very last statement that you made,
Why is that?
because that's a reality that happens all the time.
Hmm?
I cannot tell you that I've seen the same thing from one day to the next. Like, I'm going to go out tomorrow morning. I got up at 6 o'clock to film the sunrise and shoot what I could shoot. When I get up tomorrow morning, I am not going to point my camera at the same location and get the same shot. It's not going to happen.
But, okay, but at the same time, the sun's going to rise no matter where you do it from. It's going to have the same rising effect or rising appearance.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the way that
I know.
we see things.
Okay, well, it's in a sense it is the same. So at 6 feet, I'm going to see a boat start having obstruction around 3.5 miles. At 12 feet, it'll be a little bit further. I think it'll be like 6 miles or something like that. But at the same time, what ends up happening is that the boat will always start having obstruction from the bottom up. If it's foggy, it's going to obviously, if the fog bank is dense enough, then we may not see it at all. But if it's light enough, it's not going to change the fact that it has obstruction. It's just going to be harder to see. If it's let's just pretend there is a perfect day, no refraction. Boat's still going to obstruct. It just may be easier to see. That's kind of where I'm standing at. It's no matter what.
Sure.
No matter what, there's always going to be a boat starting to have obstruction from the bottom up.
Okay. Well, let me.
Like I said, if there's fog, we may not see. If it's rainy, we may not see it. But if we're able to visually see this boat, no matter what the atmospheric condition is, we're going to see an obstruction from the bottom up.
And I'm going to tell you, based on your qualification right there, you're wrong. When you say based on what the atmosphere is, okay, there's no way for you to control that variable, and I don't believe there is any way that variable will remain uniform from one day to the next. So what I hear you talking about is
why would it matter to be a variable, though?
What do you mean? Say that again?
Why would it matter to be a variable?
Because it's not the same. It's something that I can't manipulate, right? I can't manipulate the weather or the temperature or anything like that. So it's out of my control, and it varies. It's a variable. It's something that has an alternate behavior from even an hour. I've gone back. Not only that, dude. One of my very first, let's see, when was this? November. So I said that September was my first time out. I went back in November and I shot the Anacapa Islands for the very first time. And you can go and watch one of my videos where have you seen the Isle of Man, where Ranty calls it the floaty island or something? What's he call it? The floaty land or something like that, right? Hmm? I have that, but with the entire Anacapa chain, and it's floating above the water, and I find the Anacapa lighthouse, and then I move to the right for 1 minute, and then I go back 1 minute later, and it is completely different. Completely different. The atmosphere changed that fast. So that's what I mean by variable.
Okay, but at the same time, is the island there? Is the channel there?
Yeah.
Is it that?
Yeah,
it's there no matter what, right?
The reason why I'm seeing it is because it's there. But the reason, or rather, let me say, okay, the reason why I'm seeing it is because it's there. How I'm seeing it depends on the atmosphere.
Okay, perfect. That I agree. Now, if it was a boat that has obstruction, what would change the obstruction part?
It's the same thing. If you want to change the island to the boat, I'm seeing the boat because it's there. How I'm seeing it depends upon its distance because it's moving, right? If it were anchored, if it were moored, it wouldn't go anywhere. So it's not going to be, distance becomes and its motion becomes a variable as well. I also have, and I haven't published this yet. I started to. I can't remember why it got delayed. It's amazing, Sean. I think you would actually, regardless of the discussion, you would say that is some crazy shit right there. I called it the Cliffs of Insanity with the sound bite from The Princess Bride.
Yeah, I know.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So again, the very first time I went out to the Anacapa Islands, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. There was a fishing boat, and it was going below the past the water line. But I believe you could tell that it wasn't the curve because the boat was so close to us, and you could watch the atmosphere change the deck and change the captain's room and all this. So you knew that something was going on in the atmosphere. But the island in the background was really small, and the lighthouse was really big. Okay? Then I went back in January, and I got the exact opposite. I followed this boat forever. It was forever, and it was going farther than the fishing boat. And I could still see it clearly on the water line, but it was going away from me. So it was farther away. As soon as it hit the island where the lighthouse was, the island was ginormous, huge. So if I showed you this picture and said, would you say that these were these two pictures show you the same island? You would say, no way are those the same island. It was ginormous. The boat was really, really small. The cliffs were insanely huge, and the lighthouse was barely a blip. The exact opposite, right? I said before that the island was small and the lighthouse was large. It was completely opposite. So all of that to say, the way that you're describing what you think that you're going to see is too clinical, in my opinion. It's too pristine. I have never, I'll say it this way, Sean, in my hundreds of hours and thousands of pictures, I have never seen a boat obscured from the bottom up. I've seen it just get swallowed. It's never been that crisp. It's never been that pristine.
Well, okay, so are you saying that you've never seen it? Okay, you've seen it in uploads and stuff, but what you're saying is in your observations, you've never seen that happen.
No, I think, again, you know how people say they've seen the curve from 35,000 feet?
Hmm? Yeah.
And you know what our criticism of that is? Why do you say that? Why?
Well, I can tell you, you can find curvature in 100 feet at 100 feet. It just depends on the what you're using to see it. Obviously, our eyes aren't going to be able to depict a curvature at 100 feet, but with tools, we can do it easily.
Yeah, but typically the flat Earth response for someone who says, if they're having a conversation with their buddy at work and the guy goes, "Dude, I've seen the curvature from the airplane." The flathead response is typically, that's because you think that you see it. That's because you think it's there. So that would be my response. I'm just telling you. I can't, in all honesty, Sean, and you're not gonna have to take my word for it that I will be honest if I find something. But in all of my observations, I can never say that I have watched a boat disappear like a person going down an escalator and they just get eaten up from the bottom up like that. It's always just been this moving into the distance past that angle of resolution. So it is perspective, but it is also the Aether Band. That's just my experience, you know. If I see something different, if I ever see something different, then I will be the first one to send it to you and go, "Okay, dude, here it is. This is the boat disappearing from the bottom up." It's just not that clinical.
Okay, well, what you've seen boats being obstructed in uploads, correct?
Not really. I haven't really paid any attention to stuff like that recently. I don't know. I think that I've seen, like, early on when I was looking at stuff before I bought my P900, I did watch stuff, but I wasn't analyzing it. I wasn't scrutinizing it. But I do know that it looked similar to what I've got, and I would say they aren't. They're just saying what they think they're seeing. If they looked at it and we analyzed it, I would say that if you took a magnifying glass to it, you wouldn't be able to. You would say, yeah, I'm going to have to take that back. If it is happening, I don't think that that's clear enough for me to say that, and I was wrong.
Okay.
So here's what I would say, Sean. You're in California, right?
Yes, sir.
Where are you in California?
San Diego. San Diego.
Oh, you got some great spots down there.
Oh, yeah.
So here's what I would say. I would love to find someone like you where we could go to the beach and we could find or rent a boat or whatever and have that boat sail away from us. And you watch with your naked eye and you tell me when you think it's going over the curve. When we take a picture of it right then and there and then analyze the picture to see if it's that clear and see if it shows what you think it shows you. That's the only way it can be.
Well, I would think that would be the first issue would be that you wanted to do it with your naked eye. At that point, I mean, most likely we're going to see a dot in the distance, and that's why we would want to use tools to be able to verify what we're actually seeing. For instance, if we zoomed in to that boat and watched it from that zoomed in as far as we can go with whatever, use a P900 for instance, we're going to watch that boat start obstructing from the bottom up. Now, again, it's a tool because our eyes aren't going to be good enough to be able to see that far, but it still doesn't change what's happening. Now, at any point, if we're able, if at any point, if we're at say 6 feet and we have a P900 and we zoom in, we zoom in to that boat and we're able to see the boat. That means that there's no atmospheric conditions that are going to block that. For instance, fog, rainy day, something that would make it so we can't see it. There's not going to be a situation where we're going to be able to zoom into it and not see obstruction. We're going to see obstruction. That's the kind of thing that need to be. Go ahead.
Yeah, here's where I would qualify. Yeah, now that we're talking about it, and I can think back to other things that I've seen. I don't know that I have footage of this, but I know that I've seen, and we've been shown boats that are cut in half. Right. So if that's what you're talking about, that you've got a boat and you only see half the boat and it's pretty clear. I understand what you're saying now in that sense. I would argue again that is similar to what Rumpus brings up with the air turbines, the wind turbines.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the same phenomenon, and I would say again that is due to the atmosphere, and I have reason to say that because at the end of my newest intro that I put together with my footage, you can find it. I think it says award-winning FE intro or something like that, and it's just a minute long. But at the very end of it, I have probably about 6 or 7 images of the same oil rig taken from the same focal length, from the same location. And the very last, okay, so we see 7 different images of the oil rig, and you can tell it's an oil rig. And you can see that it's distorted, but it's the same one. There's one picture where it looks absolutely nothing like its other brothers, so you wouldn't think that it was an oil rig, okay? But the very last one, the oil rig is completely gone, except for the top rigging. Completely gone, Sean. The body is gone. So that's comparable to saying that you're seeing half of a boat and saying, well, that's going over the curve, okay? Now, it's impossible for that oil rig to have disappeared 3/4 of the way because I'm in the same location, same distance, and it's the same focal length. Okay, go ahead.
You said that's one of your uploads, right?
Yeah, one of the last, I don't know, recent ones. I think it was last month I put it up, and it's like I said, it says award-winning, and it's just a minute long. And you can pull it up and play it. I think it's in the last 20 seconds.
Because, like I said, because I hear what you're saying, but when you say that atmospheric optics play a part in it, then knowing that the atmosphere is almost never the same, wouldn't we always see different observations of that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's
But
why when I caught that image back in January, it was not the norm, right? Because in all of the other ones, I had practically the entire oil rig. Sometimes the body of the oil rig would be indistinguishable from the horizon, but you'll see when you pull up that video that you can see the pilings of the oil rig distinctly above the water line. But each one of those pictures is different because it's a different day and different temperature, but not a different distance. Same beach, same location.
all right, so I'm
Did you find it?
watching it. Yeah. Are you able to watch it? Because I put it on my OBS because I figured you're driving. So, or unless you're in a situation you can watch it too, or does it matter? Or
I can try to just pull it up on YouTube real quick and just look at it sideways. I'll just look at it sideways.
okay, I just know you're driving, and I didn't
No, I
want
know.
to. Almost to it. All right, there we go.
Yeah, if you
Alright,
want to
so-
skip to the end.
All right. Okay, I see what you're saying. Which tanker?
All right, right there. Okay, so if you go to the beginning of it, right there. Let it play.
Okay.
Okay, stop. Go back to that one a little bit if you can. Can you back it up just a smidge?
Yeah. I'm at 34 seconds right now.
There's a delay, so I'm seeing
Yeah.
I'm seeing the YouTube delay, and I'm hearing you, so I don't know when it's. The one that I wanted to get you to stop at was the one that they look like the Twin Towers.
All right. Let me get, oh, okay, I see it. All right, I am there. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put it on the meetup, so there's no lag between us, because kind of hard to do it that way with lag. Hang on. There we go. All right, so now you'll see exactly where I'm at. Turn this one off. All right, so there we go. So it's
Okay.
kind of blurry, but yeah.
So, if I showed you that, I don't think that you would think that was the same oil rig, right? If I showed you the one oil rig and you go, yeah, that's an oil rig, and then I showed you that one, I don't think that you would think that they were the same ones. But when you look at the oil rig, that's a really fascinating. I actually have that on camera, on video. So I have the entire thing in its transformation. It's just amazing. But if you go to the next shot, okay, you can see the division, right? So this is where I get the AT-AT. I call it the AT-AT oil rig because it looks like an AT-AT to me. Okay, but you can see the head, or it kind of looks like an alien. You can see the head and then the body, and you can see that line between the two portions, correct?
Yep.
Okay, if you go back to the one before you, that twin tower looking thing is that stretched out, like crazy shit stretched out. And then look to the very left. Look to the very left. You see that one rigging that's sticking up.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the next one.
Yeah.
There you go. It's right there.
So you're
but
basically
it's stretched.
But it's due to atmospheric conditions and everything, right?
Yeah. So what I would say happened is the entire body disappeared and the top part got stretched out like the Twin Towers.
Well, what was the day like?
I don't really give a shit. That has nothing to do with it.
Oh, it absolutely does. Because remember,
No,
you said,
no.
Wait. Well, you said that it was atmospheric conditions, so
Sure.
it would definitely
but
matter.
Right, right. But that's only if you think that you can predict what you're going to see. I'm not doing
Hmm?
that. It doesn't matter to
Why would it
me.
be? It does matter because the reason you're seeing the reason your observation is seen this way is due to atmospheric conditions. Now, the difference between what I'm trying to explain and what you're trying to explain is the fact that that oil tank or the rig, it's not going anywhere. It's staying in the same spot, right?
Yep.
So we can, whether it be this view, I think I saw this one, or this one, which I can tell you right now, it all matters on the time of day, because every one with a timestamp on it is a different part of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So,
But again, right. But all I need to know, Sean, is the reason why I'm seeing it like that is
mhm.
because of the ether band. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know the temperature. I don't need to know anything.
Well, how does the ether band explain why you're seeing it the way you are?
No, it doesn't. That's just the way it. That's just the way it is.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's the main problem then, because if again, when we use refraction or these different or different types of refraction mirages, they're explaining why we're seeing something the way we're seeing it. To say that it's because of an ether band and the ether band doesn't explain why, which means that the time of day conditions don't matter, then you're not realizing that the globe model will explain what it is in detail once you get those details.
No, no. If you want to do that, then knock yourself out. But
Hmm?
those details are going to be the same details on a flat Earth or a globe Earth, because the reason
Mm,
why hold on, the reason
the
why.
observation is going to be the same.
No, no.
The
Okay.
explanation won't.
Yes, it will, because it's still the ether band, Sean. That doesn't change.
Okay. So then why? So for instance, in
Right there.
this
Stop.
one,
Stop. Stop. That last one, right?
wait, this one
You
or
were no, you were at the very end where
okay,
I said wait for it.
I think it was somewhere
Right
about
there.
there.
That where it's all gone.
Okay, there.
Right there. Okay? You see those two riggings?
Yep.
Right? That's the very top. Okay?
Okay,
The only way that can happen is that the atmosphere, the ether band, has affected the ability to see that by squashing everything at the convergence point, or whatever you want to say about that. That's the only reason. Now, if you want to say, well, it was 68 degrees outside and the air was 68 and the water was 72, okay, great. What does that tell you? Nothing. It tells you nothing.
well, okay.
Because the other ones were 50 degrees and 40 degrees. I mean, it's just there's no uniformity, I guess is what I'm saying, right? So you would have to, Sean, find the same day or the same temperature on another day where the air and the water were the same, and then you get that same result. Do you know how you'd have to be out every day, all day long, Sean? Every day, all day long, taking shots, because you never know when that's going to happen, and nobody
Well,
has time for that.
well, the reason why an observation would want to be explained why it's happening would be for this perfect detail. Without even going to this location, if we had the temperature, the time of day, and your observer height, we could tell you exactly why you're seeing it the way you are.
That's
Which is
what.
which is also why, for instance, in this one, this one, you're not the same. You're not definitely not observing it from the same place or observational height as this one.
Finish your sentence, yeah.
Yeah, you're
No, no.
not.
Say it
You're
again.
not.
What? I'm definitely not.
Okay. Your observer height changes from this one.
Not what?
Your observer height, where you're observing it from.
Yeah, it's all the same. Yeah, it's all the same, Sean. Yes, it's all the same. That's what that's how I started this whole conversation.
Okay. Okay. Then did you zoom in, zoom out? See, because
No,
here's the thing.
okay, Sean. If
No,
you
hang on,
hold on.
hang
No,
on.
no, no. If
Well,
you go to
because
the
here's the thing.
if you go to the very last clip. No. If you go to the very last
You're cutting out. I
clip,
can't
Sean,
hear you.
I tell you, these are taken with the same focal length. I said the very last clip, I tell you that all of those images are taken from the same focal length. They are all 428 millimeter zoom. All the same. Every single one of them. Taken from the same location, same camera height.
Trying to get a link.
Did you hear me at all? I'm going through...
No, I heard you. I was
Okay.
trying to get... Barney wanted to come in. I was trying to get a link for him, but I don't know why it's not allowing me to share links. Let me get that out there. Hang on one second.
Yeah, I'm going through the sticks of Pennsylvania, so it might go in and out.
Okay, no worries, no worries. This is working. Hang on one second.
I'm not in a rush, so do what you need to.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, I just had to shut down the screen because I'm gonna keep the panel kind of less clustered today, so I'm not putting the link out right like that. I'm telling people in the chat they can. Why the hell isn't this sharing? 1, 2. Where is Barney at? There we go. All right, Barney, I just sent it to you. The link to you. Okay, so again, so this was one day.
No, it's not. It's not the same day.
Then how would you have it from the same spot or the same observer height?
Because I know where the beach is, and I went to the same parking spot and got down to the beach where I parked my car. I went to the exact same spot.
Then, so you know your observer height and everything was the same?
Yeah.
How'd you measure? How'd you check that?
Because the beach starts where the rocks end, right? So you have to climb down these rocks, and as soon as the rocks hit the beach, that's where I planted my tripod. I mean, if you're going to quibble about a couple of inches, like, well, maybe the tide washed out a few inches. Okay, that's a couple of inches, same distance, same height. I mean, that's not going to be a variable that's going to change it the way that you're looking at it. I mean, that's a drastic change. You know what I mean?
But it does change it.
Okay, not an inch, Sean. No,
Well,
not an
you're
inch.
right. An inch doesn't, but well, an inch does for something. But I mean, it definitely does change stuff. That's why when we would have these when you're making these observations, you would want to pinpoint exactly where you are.
Sean, how high do you think I should? How much of the beach should have changed? I mean, listen to yourself. You're scrambling.
No, not of the beach. I'm not scrambling at all. The beach
Yeah,
shouldn't matter.
You're trying to pinpoint the fact that I wasn't at the same height, and I'm telling you, okay, I'll give you 6 inches, I'll give you a foot maybe. Even if I was off by a foot or elevated by a foot because there was more or less sand, that foot at 10 miles and the height of my camera is not going to lose 7/8 of an oil rig.
Yeah, that's true. The foot of height of the observer is not going to cause that effect on its own. But we've had an exchange of emails today, right?
Yep.
And I've gone specifically through which points should change this. And I can fully accept that these are all images taken from the same spot on different days where you have these different effects, right?
Yeah.
So the tide is going to affect the obscuration, not by having you move a few inches away, but by raising the curve, raising your overall height from the water level, right? By raising the position of the horizon. But the bigger effect.
Okay, but it's only going to be optical, Barney. It's never going to be physical, because otherwise you would tell me that oil rig is submerged underwater.
No. So the horizon rising is not the same as the oil rig sinking. The effect on the oil rig and the effect on you will be the same.
Okay, when you say the
But
horizon, go ahead.
But wait, but the effect that is causing that difference in the images is the refractive index, is the current density of air, and therefore the density gradient of the atmosphere, which is causing more or less of a looming effect.
So when you say the, I don't remember how you put it, the raising of the horizon, right?
Yes?
Okay, is that going to be always at the same distance?
No.
Okay, so the horizon is not fixed.
No.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with that. I agree with that. But what you mean by looming and what I'm comfortable, I wouldn't use the word looming. I would, and I don't know if that's a technical term. I can't remember. I remember looking it up once before, but I think I saw more information on refraction, which I'm more comfortable using as a term than looming. When I hear looming,
Okay.
when I hear looming used by
refraction is all of the above.
well, no, because in my world,
there's different types of. I'm sorry.
Yeah. In my world, the object isn't loomed up over anything, so I won't use the term looming.
The object isn't loomed up over anything. Okay, so the way I'm familiar with the term, if you have a refraction that makes the object seem higher than it really is, that is called looming.
Okay, but as I said to Sean before, that's because the object is there. Its distance doesn't change. It's just that the atmosphere is blocking it. So when it's if it's raised up higher, and I can send you guys the link where I have this 15-minute video shot of that oil rig, and I remember shooting the oil rig, and I was, I started filming. I had it in center frame, and then I came back to it and looked at it, and the oil rig had dropped down to the bottom of the frame, and I was like, that's really weird. So I recentered the frame, and then it did it again, dropped all the way down to the bottom frame. Okay, that horizon was dropping visually. Okay, so
Okay.
it's not.
Travis, do you remember how far off that tanker is?
The oil rig.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not been able to find any Coast Guard, any naval information on the distance. So I can only estimate from what I know about the other oil rigs in the area. I would say it's probably 10 miles away, maybe 12.
Do you know what area that, or remember, or can you say what area that was?
Yeah, it's the Channel Islands. You know, what's really funny, Sean, is that the Google Earth, right? There's two sets of oil rigs in the Channel Islands. One set is closer to Santa Barbara, and those are the H oil rigs. Henry, I don't know, whatever other male names are, but they're all H's. Okay, Howard, Henry, blah blah blah. And if you go to Google Earth, they've got them right there. You can pull them up and look at them. But the G oil rigs, Gina, Glenda, Gwen, they aren't on Google Maps. They aren't there. They do not come up. So I can't measure the distance like I can with the H oil rigs. So the best I can do is say, oh, that kind of looks the same size as Henry, so I'm going to say 10 miles.
I'm trying to find them on here.
Yeah, if you just type in the Anacapa Lighthouse and Google Earth takes you to Anacapa Lighthouse, just scroll out a little bit and then look up to the top left of your screen, and you'll see that they've got the H oil rigs in a darker shade up by Santa Barbara, just above Carpinteria.
Alright, Channel Island.
Barney, do you sleep, man?
No, I work night shifts.
Yeah, but you were up earlier today on Jose, so it's like, when are you always at night?
That was my afternoon.
Okay.
So that's about the time where my kids come home from school and I take them outside for a walk. Like that's usually when Jose's comes up.
Yeah, okay.
And then when I put them to sleep, I come to the office, work all night, then sleep through the morning mostly. And in the afternoon, go pick up my kids and start joining Hangouts.
Yeah.
Trying to find a link to it. I had it a second ago.
Are you trying to pull up Google Earth or what?
Yeah. Well, I have. It's on Google Earth. Or I'm on Google Earth, but I'm not seeing where you're. I'm not. It's not giving me the locations of anything, any of them. I just found a website that does it though. Trying to. There it is. Okay, I see what you're saying. Alright, let's see if I can get this to pull up. Because I found one that has the H's and G's. Grace, Gilda, Gail, Gina.
Yeah. Does it give you any of the information in terms, because again, the point is that where my beach is, it's not going to tell you necessarily that beach's distance from them, but I'd be interested if you have like dimensions and height and everything like that, because I had a hard time finding it.
Did you? So which one did you say it was again?
The ones that you're looking at are G's. I think that the one
Okay.
that we're looking at is Gina, but I don't know.
Okay, yeah, Gina would be the closest one. Excuse me, the closest one to shore of the G's. So I'm gonna go ahead and look that one up.
Well, yeah, but it depends on which shore you're talking about, because I'm up in the Rincon. So do you have a link for that? I'd be interested to find out what you're looking at.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like I said, I was trying to find that stuff, and I had a difficult time finding any information that was details. Like I wanted to know how tall they were. You know,
well, this one
yada,
doesn't
yada, yada.
isn't giving me any dimensions on it, but just being able to know the name of which rig we're looking for is the one I'm looking at. You said you were off what coast? Because Gina is off the coast of Oxford.
Oxnard.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm about 10 miles north of Oxnard, 12 miles north, just past Ventura. So if you want to put in, Rincon Parkway. Rincon Parkway is a mobile home parkway that you can park your mobile home or your camper on the side of the beach.
Okay, so it says Aura Rig Gina is. It says Gina will be visible off of the swimmer's left side at the distance of. Wait, this is some swim. Hang on, it's not gonna give me the right distance. Let's see.
Like I said, did you put the link in the? Okay.
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that the link for it?
It's a link to the the little diagram that I'm looking at, but
Okay.
I'll send you the actual website that I was just on.
Yeah, I have not seen that image before, so kudos to you, man.
Yeah, this is, and then the second link that I'm putting in right now is the website I got that illustration from, and I'll put that in the chat too for everyone.
Okay. Frac tracker. Okay.
Yeah. And then so let me see if I get that. See what I got on information on it.
You know what'll be interesting is if I just go back to the house today and just, what did you put in for your search terms?
Oil rigs off Channel Islands location.
Okay. Yeah. I'll put that in and see what pops up.
Right,
I'll try to be generic and not look for anything intentional, just to see what comes up.
Kind of just searching through Google Pro right now, see if I can find one off the shore. All right. Oh wow, okay, I see. That's way off the Channel Islands. That's not even close. I guess if they're pinpointing it, it is, huh? Yeah, I don't even see oil rigs on Google Earth. Probably turn my layers on, huh? All right. So what I'm seeing, because I'm trying to measure it right now, it says it is. Okay. This site may be better for that. Yeah, so it's not showing me any distance. All right, so let's see what it says. Everything I'm seeing 4 miles that's just 4 miles.
Well, that might be right, but is that off of the shore of Oxnard? If that's off the shore of Oxnard, I'm farther up, so it's not going to be 4 miles.
Okay, I think I found it. All right, so it says, so 27 oil rigs off the platform off California. Oh yeah, none of these are saying the distance.
Yeah. I found a lot of people that posted pictures on Facebook and did vlogs and things like that, but they never had the specs that I was looking for.
I'm not finding anything that gives me the distance.
Yeah.
So comparing the image of Frac Tracker with Google Earth, I would say that Gina, that's the one we are looking for.
Yeah.
Well, again, I don't know, guys. I don't know if it is Gina. I'm guessing based on past conversations where people have said to me when I've shown them what my picture is, they say, I think that's Gina. So I just don't know. I'm going to be going down into a pocket, so if I drop off, I'll have to try to join back in. So
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Based on the position on the Frac Tracker image and the indication of the pipeline, I think you can actually see it on Google Maps. it's not scanned, but you can see it in the. Let me share what I'm doing. That might be helpful. This and this, and I need to share my window. And now the window. This window. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So, do you see this formation in the sea? That's one indicator. There's kind of a bay in the river here, and you see a pipeline here, and this is where Gina is, right? Next to this formation. So when you look at Google Earth, this is the formation. This is this formation, right?
Okay, so you're
And
right.
this bay and this this outlet are here. This bay and this
Measure
outlet. Wait.
measure from that
And
shelf.
wait. And then you see actually when you zoom in, you see what I think is the pipeline and the
Yeah.
location of the oil rig, right? That coincides with this pipeline and the indication where Gina is.
Yeah, because I'm looking at that shelf line.
All right, I'm back.
Yeah, so we kind of have a approximate area. What's the distance from that shelf to the shore, though?
From
What shelf are you talking about?
this shelf?
Yeah. It's going to be a little bit further than the outdoor rig, but we'll at least have a...
It's 7,000 meters from the shelf to the shore. 7 kilometers, 7.5.
Can you guys hear me? I'm back.
Yeah, we hear you.
Back.
Yeah, it's only about 4.5. It's
Okay.
no, it's not even 4 miles. Yeah, so if it's Gina, then it's not even 4 miles, maybe 4 miles.
Yeah.
That's not right, but that's not where I'm viewing from, Sean.
Where are you
It's-
viewing from?
I already told you.
Well, it'd be
The
from
Rincon Parkway. No. The Rincon Parkway up the coast. That's what I said to you before. When you said Oxnard, I said that's
Okay, what's it called?
it's called Rincon Parkway.
Rincon
or
Beach?
Rincon's, yeah, because it's where a strip of mobile homes. They have like over 100 parking spots along the coast. So the point that you have your marker. Okay.
Okay, get me out of that. North.
I've got screenshots in my files on Google Earth where I've mapped out where I think things are.
Faria Beach, Rincon Parkway.
Yeah, it's just above Faria. It's about another mile up Faria.
To where we think Gina is 25 kilometers.
at 25 kilometers. I would think, and that's a lot of refraction. a lot of stuff
That's
going on there.
okay.
But see,
That's okay.
Go ahead. Let me see. So,
How far is 25 kilometers?
I think that will be 16 miles.
Over 15 miles?
Yeah.
Yeah, I said I thought it was around 10 to 12.
1.6.
but see, here's the
15
thing.
15.5 miles.
So you know for sure that you were looking at one of the G's, right?
Yeah.
Because from where you're looking, it's kind of hard with how I have my Google Pro set up. Hang on.
Well, if you keep that marker down on the shelf where you're at, right? If you reverse your measurement and put where you're starting at that marker on the shelf, and then go up, to the beach just past Faria, that'll give you a good idea as to where I was.
Yeah, that's. And so this is Faria.
So you started in the morning, and that's kind of hard to say. Because basically what I'm trying to get at, or what I'm looking at, would be knowing when you took these, like the time of day and the conditions really matter. In my opinion, at least.
Yeah. I don't think so, because I'm not trying to prove the same thing you are. To me, when you bring that up, it seems to me more important for your argument, not mine.
Yeah. It is. So
Yeah.
we want to. I don't know what are we doing here.
I'm just trying to see. Well, it started off as our observations being what they are, and then it turned into basically. I'm not really sure. It's one of those things where it's like I know what we were talking about is what we are observing and why we observe it. The problem I see in this situation now is that we don't have enough information to even use this situation.
Well, I'm not asking Barney to evaluate the footage that I have from the Channel Islands. The stuff that he and I are going to work on are a lot more proximate at just 5.85 miles, and he has the information on the and I can even send you a picture of the house, Barney, if you want to see what the picture of the house looks like. But
no, I have it on maps. I know where it is. That's pretty much everything that I need to know. What I'm missing in the data is time and date of the pictures.
Yeah.
Right. And
well, all I have to do is get into my files and pick one. So, I can do that tonight.
Don't pick one. Find the ones where find 3 or 4 of the most different ones, right? Where the position that you're looking for, it has some occlusion by the horizon, right? Or it sometimes has an occlusion and sometimes doesn't.
I can see straight down to the shoreline, and I can also not see straight down to the shoreline. So
that's what I mean. On some days you can see, on some days you can't, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm kind of betting that I can do is that if you give me, if you pick a set of images and give me the times and dates when they were taken, I can tell you which of those you will see the shoreline and which of those you won't. Or how like I can calculate the occlusion with the exact curvature, the exact local acceleration due to gravity, the exact meteorological conditions.
Acceleration due to what?
Gravity. Right? See, there's this great thing called a geoid database, and there's multiple of them, where local gravity is measured very, very, very precisely based on that geoid database. The sea level for that place is calculated. So
let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
Would you be able to say in your predictions, let's say I send you 5 pictures, and in one of those pictures you say Based on this information, you're going to see a smudge. Would that be something of a prediction that you would make, or would it be more
No.
precise?
I cannot give you local aberrations, right? I cannot tell you whether you will have an inferior mirage or a superior mirage or shimmering or fog or stuff like that. Those are the things that I can tell you based on the meteorological report. If there was fog, right? You're not going to see anything because there was fog. But as far as the curvature is concerned, as far as the occlusion by the horizon is concerned, I can get the accurate overall refraction and tell you how much of a looming effect it will have. The atmosphere always has a looming effect due to the fact that it's a density column, right? It is denser at the bottom, rarer at the top, and you can model how light will move through that column. I cannot tell you whether there will be a hot spot somewhere or a heat sink somewhere that will slightly distort the image, right? Or some ephemeral effect that will last only for a few seconds. That I cannot tell you. I can tell you how much it will loom, how much over the horizon you will see, where the horizon will be, right? Those things that it seems to me you're claiming that I cannot get as the averages.
Yeah, so I want to try to make all of the qualifications before this happens, so that I don't say, "Oh yeah, that's what I meant." So what I hear you saying, again, to me, I said this to Sean a little bit earlier. It sounds to me that you think that you could be clinical based on math, right? So you're going to give me, distance and air temperature and whatnot, and you're going to tell me mathematically what the horizon is going to do in terms of occluding the house that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
My point, okay. My point is that is going to be absolutely meaningless if you're right. Technically, I'm going to say if you're right, but then the Aether Band comes in, and I show you what the image says, image looks like, and you say, well, yeah, I mean, I'm right, but that image is totally distorted, so there's no way to verify, but I'm right because the math works.
Well, if it's so distorted that we cannot determine any of the features on the house, like if it's completely, if all the details are completely blurred out, and we cannot determine anything about the house, like how much of the house is hidden or not, then yes, you're right. That's something that I like. If we do not have the data, if we do not see how much is occluded, then I cannot compare that to the calculation. Right. So I'm assuming that you will pick the images where the occlusion is at least somewhat clear, right? I know that this is just.
I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you let's say 5. You want 5? If I move up this, if I move up the spectrum from the clearest I've got, which is pretty damn clear and pretty freaking awesome, and then the one where I have absolutely no idea what I'm looking at, I'm going to give you a spectrum from 1 to 5.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So there are two effects at play. One is refraction. The other one is seeing, right? If you take a photo in the fog, then I'm not going to see the other side. There will be no horizon.
Yeah, I don't take photos in the fog.
You know what I mean, right? It doesn't have to be a fog. It can be a mist, or if there is no horizon to be seen at all, then that's not what I'm measuring. That's something that I can tell you from the atmospheric data alone, right?
Yeah.
So as I said in the email, what I intend to do is try to get the GeoE database for that region, try to find the nearest weather station and get log data, a data log, like accurate measurements over time for that specific day for pressure and temperature, and other conditions such as humidity and which might tell me how much of a seeing I expect. You will give me the coordinates and the times. I will find out what the tide is, and that information should be enough for me to calculate what the strength of the looming effect is. If I know the density, if I know the local curvature, and I can from the density at the weather station, I can calculate the column. Right.
Just so you guys know, I'm going to start
All
opening
right,
the panel.
sounds good.
I'm going to open the panel up, but this is to everyone. I'm not really in the mood for trolling, so keep it respectful and let's keep it on topic.
Shout out, Shunji. Thank you, brother.
What up, Jose? How you
Hey,
doing, sir?
I went out. I'm just
Jose.
getting home. I was doing new observations, playing Truth. I took my Jeram for a ride. I went to Clearwater Beach. I never taken footage from the actual Clearwater Beach where you seen all these documentaries and rich people. It was fucking awesome today. Then I went to the a bridge that divides like Clearwater, and then it takes you to Tampa Bay area, to the actual Tampa downtown. So I went to that one bridge from the end of the Clearwater section. We pulled over underneath, and I took some videos and pictures to the Tampa Bay downtown and stuff. It's a different spot. Red Rhetorics and Sean Hofer have been taking some observations to the same buildings and the downtown, but I was in a totally different spot. A little closer, it's like, I think from 13 to 15 or 17 miles away, something around there. Yeah, so I got a bunch of pictures. I'll probably go live in like an hour and a half to 2 hours because I got a lot of footage when I got to Clearwater Beach. I start walking just my camera on hand, and you can see the whole thing, just it was people all over the place, and it's fun. It's a fun footage. But then in a spot in the long pier, I took footage from a lighthouse that I have taken the observation of the lighthouse from a different spot, about 8.5 miles away. And this one is about 13.5 miles away from the Clearwater Beach Pier to the same lighthouse. It was, unfortunately, a lot of inferior mirage going on. Actually, not a lot, but it was some. So it's going to be a cool footage to watch, to break it down. But this is Travis is going to love this one because shout out to the Aether Band. You're talking about this. There's a little bit of an optical phenomena going on, but I still haven't, because I haven't gone to these points before to do observations. It's the first time. So I have to key in exactly the distance to the lighthouse. I got to see the height of that pier. It's maybe 15 or 20 foot, above the water, plus the tripod. I will try to go live and break it down, pull Google Earth and see all the details and see if I can, if we can figure something out on what I'm looking. Really cool footage, yeah. I'm looking forward to share it with you guys.
Yeah, I'll check that out for sure.
And then in the downtown, there's some more bridges. There's like, I was in a bridge, and there's 2 more bridges, about 2 to 3 miles distance from each other. And then the downtown is all the way at the end. And you can see the cars, you can see the buildings like sitting in the water, some of them. And then you can see the cars kind of a little hovering above the water. Look, a really cool effect of this freaking inferior mirage mirroring type of thing. But I saw it through my viewfinder when it was really bright and the sun, and I haven't turned it on or reviewed in the big screen. So yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to see how that looks on the computer.
So a question just came to my mind, Sean. Remember we were talking earlier, and you made the qualification about seeing the boat go over the curve with your naked eye as opposed to with an optical instrument.
Yeah, I remember.
Right. So the story goes that Aristotle is a person who claims that the Earth is curved because of boats going over the curve. Have you heard that story?
In a sense, yeah.
So did he see that with his naked eye? Because telescopes weren't around back then.
Yes.
Yeah,
So he
Was
did
it
see it with his
Aristotle?
naked eye?
Was he Aristotle, the name, the guy?
Yeah, that's Eratosthenes is the one who measured the circumference of the Earth, but Aristotle is the one that we're told began teaching that the Earth was curved because boats go over the horizon.
I think you have your information incorrect.
Oh, great, because I've heard that over and over and over again. From
Pythagoras was the first
Pythagoras.
person to measure the circumference of the Earth.
Okay, well, that's not my point.
Oh,
My point is
Pythagoras was the
Aristotle.
first. Pythagoreans were supposedly the first who posited that the Earth was round.
Okay, right. But that's not my point. My point is that the story is that Pythagoras did his thing, Eratosthenes did his thing, Aristotle's claim to fame, and one of the recent mainstream arguments against flat Earth BBC thing, their very first point was Aristotle taught that ships go over the curve. My point is, if we can't see that with our naked eye, how did he determine that?
Who says that we can't see it with our naked eye?
I do, for one, and Sean seemed to agree with me earlier.
No, I didn't say that we couldn't. I said that situations, depending on your observational height, that would play a factor. What I brought into the whole zoom part of it is because that whole bring it back into focus and all that kind of stuff. That's why I said it. The reason I would use tools. I wouldn't trust my naked eye. That's just me.
That's part of my point, though. My point is, and I'll go on the record, and I'll take a kick to the shin. No one can tell anyone that with their naked eye, they have seen a boat go over the curve.
Yeah, no, impossible. I mean, yeah, impossible. For real, the resolution of your eyes, I mean, whatever objects in the further distance, miles and miles away, you're just going to be able to distinguish anything.
Hey, Travis,
So,
what's the difference between the two?
Aristotle's arguments for spherical Earth, he proposed three arguments. One was that due to gravity, everything tends towards the center, and that was actually shown by Archimedes that would always form a sphere. That travelers traveling south, see the constellations, southern constellations rise higher above the horizon, and that the shadow of the Earth on the moon during the lunar eclipse is round.
Yeah, well, I can verify.
Those are Aristotle's arguments.
Well, that might be another source, but I can verify that I have left comments on video presentations where the very first argument is Aristotle told us that ships go over the curve.
Well,
and I have said in the comment that I made, I said, can you provide citation, please?
hang on. What would it
Still
matter
waiting
whether
for
he
it.
says we can or not? We can see it. We do see it.
No, we can't. No, we can't. Not
So
with your
then-
naked eye, you can't.
What does it matter if it's your naked eye or using a
Don't
tool
make the
to
claim.
wait?
You don't make the
Don't
claim.
make the claim.
Okay, listen.
Wait, hang on.
Listen.
Hang on. Is there a difference between what we see using a tool change what happens for real, or is it just a tool to better see?
Okay. If we can agree that, and I think I've got Jose on my side now, if we can agree that the human eye, unaided, cannot, with accuracy, make out the details of a ship going over a curve, like watching a car go over a hill with that kind of detail, if we can say that that is impossible for the human eye, unaided, to do that, then how can Aristotle, or the story that Aristotle saw the ship go over the curve, be true? because he didn't have a telescope.
Why are you claiming
That's my
that we
point.
cannot see? That we cannot see, like, how much of a detail do you need to see that the hull of a ship goes away before the masts or the
Well,
sails?
if you're okay, not to be. If you're asking that question, you haven't made any observations.
Well, fair enough. I like off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure that I've seen ships by naked eye go behind the horizon.
I know I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Depends on what size ship you're talking about.
Observation, or
That's
like, yes, it was before I joined the flat Earth debate, so I didn't take any careful measurements. But
that's why I have an outstanding challenge for me to go to the beach with somebody, and you tell me when you see the ship go over the curve, and we'll take a picture and put it to
Travis,
scrutiny.
but does the observation change if we use a tool?
Well, the details will. I mean, if you zoom in, right? Because if I'm looking at a ship or a boat at 4 miles away, and I can't tell you what the name of that ship is, but then we get binoculars out and then we see that it says Sassy Sue. Yeah, there's significant difference there. I can't see it
yes,
with my
there is
naked eye.
significant difference. But we're not talking about reading letters off the hull of the ship. We're talking about distinguishing sails from the hull.
No, I didn't talk about distinguishing sails. That's what I'm saying. We have to identify what details you're telling me you can distinguish with your unaided eye. And I'm saying I would never make a bet on anything with my unaided eye because
Okay.
I don't.
You can distinguish detail up to what, 1 second of arc or something like that.
Not with the
Ships,
Aether
they
Band.
had 2 or 3 sails, one on top of each other. So, like,
I'm not arguing about that. I'm arguing about your ability to see below that with any, So like, okay, let me ask you this question: are you telling me that, like, say for instance, you,
Hang on. Hey, Travis, is your argument
yeah,
that boats aren't obstructed due to curvature, or that you can't see it? What's the argument?
Oh, sorry, one arc minute, not 1 arc second.
Right, it's about 0.02 degrees.
right? That just happens to work out to the same perspective ratio for the eye without bringing in curvature. But
No, that's
So
the
Hang on,
Riley
that's an
criterion.
assertion.
so my point is that
That's 30 centimeters at 1 kilometer distance.
that means absolutely nothing when you're looking through the Aether Band.
You keep saying the
Well-
Aether Band, but the reality of it is, and I've noticed you said this a few, and I've noticed you said this a couple times now. Your world.
Yeah, that's my term. Yep.
Yeah, fair enough.
You can't change. Hang on, Barney. You can't change. Hang on, Barney. You can't. How do you change? You're changing observations to suit your view rather than
No.
what the observation is.
What's the difference? No, if I called it the atmosphere, you wouldn't be criticizing me because I'm just referring to the air, Sean. Okay.
But when but earlier when I said that refraction and all these other things play a part and that we can explain it, you said it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. Ultimately, right. It doesn't matter because, again, if you give me the clinical equation for what you think the horizon is going to do by blocking an object, right? But you don't take into account the way the air is going to distort that object because you can't predict what that's going to do or change, then there's no way for you to measure or confirm your equation. All you can say is, my equation works out. Look, the numbers crunched, and that's what it says. So that's what it is. And then I show you this, fuzzy picture, and you go, well, yeah, my numbers are still there. It's just fuzzy. No.
Well, yes, I cannot tell you how fast. Like, if we're going to measure the level of the sea, once again, if we're going to measure the level of the sea, I will not be able to tell you the position of each ripple and wave on that sea or how high they're going to be. About the waves, I will be able to tell you, like, generally whether the sea will be more or less still or wavy. But I won't be able to tell you the height of each wave or indicate, oh, in 2 seconds there will be a wave there that wasn't there before. That I cannot tell you. But I can tell you, despite the sea being wavy, and despite there being very few points where it is exactly at sea level, I can still tell you what the sea level is, and I can measure the tide as the what's it called, the change from that average sea level, right? Those things that, like, the fact that it is choppy locally in one spot does not bother me that much in calculating the overall effect. And
I'm not,
when we're talking about sea level, it doesn't bother you either. You don't say there is no such thing as sea level, right?
right, but that's what the points that you're bringing up right now, Barney, aren't a part of my argument. But I was going to try to ask this question to a couple of the guys who brought up the sails and the level. You know, if there's 3 levels of sails. So if you go to the beach for a day and you show up and you set up all your stuff, you know, blankets are out, yada yada yada, and then you happen to look out and you see a ship, but all you can see are the sails, and your eyes can't make out the bottom. That doesn't mean that you're seeing the bottom obscured by the curve. Okay? That you just can't resolve the bottom of the boat because of the atmosphere.
Travis,
Yeah.
I appreciate you a lot, man, and I thank you because you go out there and do observations. There's points that I'm with you, you know, like, yeah, we got to figure it out, we got to break it down, but there are, most of the time, I think, like, what do you want to accomplish? Do you think where you at right now on all these observations, research, discussions, ideas, and cross-referencing, do you think you have a solid proposal to make, not a thesis or an essay or a scientific paper? Do you think you can do a presentation about this is what's going on, this is how it works, and this is how how everybody moving forward will know how either whatever things disappear from the bottom up or something like that? I don't know if you understand my question, but how long until you're ready to do this, to do the next step and do your proposition?
Yeah, I started putting one together last week, and I forgot I didn't push record, so I'm going through all of my pictures and talking, and then I look over and I didn't push record, and I was just so frustrated. So then I contacted you and said, hey, I'd like to do a presentation because I have all the stuff pulled up in a file and it's ready to go. So it's just a matter of making that time work. So
Travis, you have no script or essay.
Excuse me?
Okay, so what Jose is talking about, have you got an essay and a list of data points for a presentation to be recorded?
I thought he was asking me for just like a generic presentation where I show stuff and talk about stuff. I have not, again, I have not gone into the nitty-gritty of the details in terms of air temperature and water temperature and things like that. Right now, I've just been accumulating visual data.
Fun fact, water and air temperature, when it's the closest to each other or the same temperature, water versus air, is where you get the more clear imagery without inferior, superior mirage and all this waviness and haziness in the air, just by experience on my observations.
And in my observations, that's not true. I went out this week and looked at the air temperature and the water temperature, and they were within a few degrees of each other, and I had massive distortion. I didn't have any mirroring, but I had distortion. So You know, I mean, it's that's.
Did you have a little breeze going? Little breeze is good. At least
No, it's
10
not.
miles.
Actually,
At
no, it's
least
not. See,
5
that's
to
so
10.
funny.
Really?
That's so funny, Jose. And I don't want to disparage your experience, but I had a day where the air temperature and the water temperature was the same, and it was windy. And man, I couldn't. It squashed the lighthouse. The lighthouse that I normally shot was like an inch in my viewfinder, and it went down to like a third of an inch, maybe a quarter of an inch. It was squashed, and it looked like the day was on the Sahara Desert. It looked like it was 200 degrees because the air was so wavy, so turbulent. But it was a beautiful day temperature-wise, and
Okay, Travis.
it was
just a mistake you've made. You've mistaken breeze for wind.
No, it's not a mistake.
They are two different things.
What's the difference between a stream and a creek?
Hey, no, you're
no.
okay.
Can
You're comparing wind to water.
Can you tell me what the difference is between a stream and a creek?
What does that have to do with a breeze and wind?
Okay, tell me what the difference is between breeze and wind.
Okay, a breeze is anything under 3 knots. So, 3 miles an hour.
Okay.
Okay? Wind is anything up to, I think it's 25 miles an hour.
Okay.
So from 3 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour is wind. A breeze is anything below that 3 miles per hour. So you're using two different things to make it sound like the same thing.
Okay. A stream and a creek, there's the difference. A creek is a small stream, where a stream is referred to as an enlarged, compared to a small river or brook. But a stream in general accordingly refers to any flow or liquid of any size.
Stream is a small river.
That tells me absolutely nothing. I still don't know what it is. What is it?
Okay, well, a creek is basically a small river, and a stream is a river of larger size, of any size, or basically larger size. I'm sharing the right now, so.
Yeah. So. I'm just saying. The way that I've heard people talk about what you can see is so disparate when I go out. I think to myself, no one can say anything about how they're going to see this. No one can know what they're going to see. No one can anticipate it. No one can predict it.
It just depends to which level of detail you're asking for.
Well, like say for instance, I think we all can agree that the standard for mirroring is if the air temperature is higher than the water temperature, or if the water temperature is higher than the air. If those two things are in conflict, you're going to get the same result, right? You're going to get mirroring, right?
No. In one case, you will get an inferior mirage, and the other, you will get a superior mirage.
Okay, that's mirroring.
And no, it's not.
You're what you're doing is you're downplaying. You're making one big issue, one big thing, optic, into everything when it's not. So when we talk about the air and the water temperature, there's distinguishable. There's a huge difference between the two.
So in your I'm saying
not my world and go ahead.
No, I'm saying that a mirage is a mirroring effect.
No,
Inferior mirage has mirroring, and superior has mirroring.
No? Not quite. That it appears to be that, but it's not necessarily that.
So it
well,
says,
not necessarily and not quite. Seems a little bit flexible.
An inferior mirage has mirroring, whereas a I'm showing it on my screen. A superior mirage
Uh,
it's not going to
No,
have
no,
the same
no,
mirror.
no. I don't. Yeah, yeah. I don't want to see that. I want to see what's below. Show me the what's below.
That's looming.
Yeah, there is no mirror.
No, that's no. Okay, that's not looming. That whole band of air underneath that is water. Okay, so that, and I've done this in my presentations.
So wait, you're saying when this image we're looking at, the boat that appears to be hovering over the water, you're saying what?
That's on what? I'm saying that's the ether band underneath the boat. The ether band is blocking the water.
So you throw a line, a
looming.
horizontal line, right where the boat is sitting, and that will be the water line. That will be the horizon.
Yep. You just raise that water line straight up to the boat. Yep.
What if there were buildings in the background behind that boat, and you can just see the tip of the buildings? When you throw this imaginary line now, where the boat is sitting, everything will be disappear behind the water.
Everything will be disappeared.
No, because
I agree with that.
No, because the well, again,
the buildings would be in line with the boat.
We have to not talk about it. We have to see it. Okay, so I would rather us talk about an actual image that we're looking at, because I have images where I'm shooting across the Chesapeake Bay. I have boats. Hold on, go back to that one. Right. So go back up to the one with the inferior. Okay.
It's not an inferior mirage.
Okay, whatever. So
wait. Hang on. Because this is the same thing that happened with Free-Minded, and it's kind of can't just change things. Again.
Yes. Okay. Hold on,
look,
Sean.
An inferior mirage is when the cool air is above and the hot air is on the surface, whereas a superior mirage is the opposite, where it's a cooler water or cooler surface to the higher temperature, warmer temperature of the air.
Okay, go back
above.
scroll down to the image below this one. Okay, I'm gonna say this as clearly as I can. The water line, the physical water line that is below that boat is behind that lighter blue band that's underneath the boat. Okay, so at the point at which the water ends and you think that's the horizon, move your cursor now up to the bottom of the boat and pretend that that's the water continuing to go up. That's what's physically there. Okay, it's physically there. That boat is not over the curve being brought back up. It is physically in front of you, and the reason why you can't see anything underneath it is because of what I will take a kick to the nuts for, called the ether band.
What's the ether band?
Okay.
It is the atmospheric blocking of the extended horizon into the distance. I have numerous pictures with this.
Citation needed.
Travis, is the ether band a summary of all the optical phenomena, inferior, superior, Fata Morgana, Fata Formosa, everything in one word named ether band? Is that how you call it?
You bet.
And it's also a synonym for the atmosphere because he refuses to use the word sphere.
Yeah.
No, I'm also trying to just be creative. You know, I'm an artist, right? I'm an artist. I'm going out and I'm making an observation that is challenging the mainstream, and I am giving my interpretation, just like Copernicus did, or whoever. You know, they make an observation, they make an idea, and I've got to come up with an idea. I've got to come up with a name to describe this, and they create a word. It's called
interpretations. Don't have to be actually the meaning of something.
What?
Wait, I want to eat some crow because I said that you cannot get mirroring with the superior mirage. Yes, you can. And this is what it looks like.
Oh, the
you got the
upside down.
inverted, in the inverted image, like hovering above the actual object.
Yeah. That's mirroring. That's mirroring with a superior mirage.
Have you guys seen my looming unicorn freighter?
I have. I understand because it's just you called it that of one of those phenomena that you recorded.
That was absolutely fantastic.
Three-toed gnome.
When you say the ether band, do you mean like those pictures of hills with mists, and the closer hills you can see, but the further away hills you can't see because of the mist. Is that what's the ether band?
I'm sorry, that was a little bit too abstract for me to follow you. I don't mean. I'm not really sure I understand exactly what you're
Aren't
saying.
you an artist?
Are you trying to be smartass?
Yes.
No, you just said you were an artist, but you couldn't grab a concept.
Guys,
Well, maybe it's my fault,
no,
but if
okay,
someone
listen.
understood me because of my language, so if
No.
someone else
Listen.
understood me.
I wasn't okay. This is just like what Brenda did the other day when I said, "What is Doppler shifting?" and she said, "What, you don't know?" Okay, look, I didn't follow what you were saying. I'm not saying you said something wrong or you were unclear. I simply said to you, I'm not following what you're saying. And now for you to then throw it back in my face and say, aren't you an artist? Is a
I was
smart.
just joking with you, man.
Okay, well,
Thanks.
it's listen, come on, Carlos. It's hard to know, you know? It's hard to know.
You asked if I was being smart. I said yes.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
My
I apologize.
My bad, man. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to derail the conversation.
That's all right.
Can I do a quick analogy, Travis? Can I do a quick analogy? 2 minutes. So, I mean, because you are talking about these phenomena, optical phenomena, I hope that you are able to identify when we are looking at inferior mirage versus a superior mirage versus a fata morgana. And by looking at an image, you say, yeah, this effect, it happens because either the water was cooler or the water was hotter than the air. You should be able to do that instead of lump it all into a band called the ether. And now let me do the quick analogy. If I was a doctor, I say I'm a doctor, and I'm gonna call every sickness, everything that people is wrong with people, I'm gonna call it the monster. So if they bring a patient like, oh, I've been coughing blood, and it's really bad. I said, let me see, and I put the little gadgets in the heart and cough. Yeah, that's a monster. Next, and then they come another lady like, my body itches. What the fuck? And I said, like, yep, you got the monster, ma'am. I mean, did you understand the analogy that I'm doing? You should be able to identify every single observation. If you want to lump it all and call it the ether band, it's okay, the artistic way, but you should be able to identify them.
Well,
do you agree with me?
You know, what I would say to distinguish what you're saying is that I'm saying that the ether band will produce a fata morgana. The ether band will produce an inferior mirage. I'm not saying that an inferior. I'm not labeling them all the ether band. I'm saying the ether band is the cause for each of those different phenomenons that happen because the air temperature is the same as the water, or the water temperature is warmer than the air. So again, when and if I have to make a presentation where I defend my statements, I'll be more precise.
You wouldn't mind if those of us a little more scientifically inclined tried to understand the effects of temperature and pressure and things like that, would you?
No, not at all. Knock yourself out.
Okay.
I did put in the chat my looming unicorn freighter, and the minute mark is 11 minutes. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I just have a query on this ether band thing. If you are going to use it to describe scientific phenomena, you need to have it as a cited paper.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
you just need to have a definition for it.
Yeah. I'm just a working class blue collar guy. So no, I don't.
So it's something that you made up.
Yeah, just like John Wycliffe made up the word atonement when he was translating the Bible, because no word in the English, there was no word in the English for what he needed to translate. Yeah, so he wordsmithed something. That's what I'm doing. Okay.
Yeah, but you've created something, but not given the definition for it to anybody else but yourself.
No. Demonic Davros or whatever. In my cache of videos, the first time I mentioned the ether band, I believe, is with Tim Osman. Okay, so it's on the record. I had 5 other discussions with 5 other people where I talk about the ether band, so it's on the record.
So So you're using something that I will not find in any dictionary, thesaurus, encyclopedia, online search, or anything.
How long does it take for a new hip hop word to make its way into the dictionary?
Relevance?
My word hasn't caught on yet, right?
If it is.
Yeah, if it even does, right? Okay, I really don't know why you're busting my balls about speaking of a phenomenon in a way that I want to bring a nuance into the discussion.
Okay, so
It's about
how are you bringing
understanding.
nuance? Wait, how are you bringing in a nuance if you're not defining your term? If you're
It's just the air. Okay, fine. I'll just start using the air. Okay, it's the air, guys. It's the air.
So wait, is one question: is the ether band just your alternative word for the atmosphere, for what we call atmosphere?
I guess if you think about the atmosphere as anything above our heads in the sky, I'm thinking of what's looking out over the horizon. So it's more proximate to the perspective that we have closer to the ground. So I don't know if I would. To me, the atmosphere is up, but I would say it's the air. I'm just talking about it being the air.
Oh,
Okay, so it's not optics.
So can I say something here,
What
Travis?
do you mean?
If
Hold
you're
on,
really
I'm sorry,
serious,
Maxwell. Hold on, I'm sorry, Maxwell. Hold on. Khalid. Okay, hold on. I can't hear you right now. Go back to Dominic. Is that what your name is?
It's demonic.
Demonic. Okay, sorry. No, what was your statement? Because it got lost. I'm sorry.
Okay, you call the ether band air. Okay, then you determine it to be also optical effects because of the air.
Right. Okay. So look, the reason why I called it the ether band, right? Because it is the air. But if you think about that boat that was appearing to float above the horizon, below that was a strip of air, or an air strip, or an air band.
There was
no air below that
That's
boat.
a mirage.
No. Listen to me, okay? Listen, because I'm going to make a qualification. I'm saying.
hold on, time out.
Hold on. No. You hold on. It's not that there's air below it. That's the optical phenomenon. That's the mirage.
Yeah.
It's the air between me and the boat that is presenting a mirage.
Okay,
yes. Okay, so
if you're really interested in this, Travis, I posted a link for you. It's called farmersalmanac.com/Fata Morgana, and it's a common known thing that happens.
I looked up the Fata Morgana last week. Yeah. Okay. I'll look this up. I just touched the link, and it's in my browser right now. So when I get back
that's where the Flying Dutchman came from. So they've known about this for quite some time.
Yeah, but it's not looming, Maxwell. It's not coming up over the horizon. It's straight out in front of you, and the what you think is the horizon line is actually the place where the mirage begins, and the water continues to extend into the distance. Look, go watch my video with Tim Osman. I totally talk about this.
I agree with that.
You understand that, like, when, for instance, if I'm looking at that image of the boat that appears to be floating, I don't assume that the water line that we're seeing is the horizon. I know there's a mirage. I know that there's an atmospheric phenomenon that is happening.
Yeah.
And unless you're willing, see, here's the thing I've started to notice that you're trying to say that the way we're explaining it and why it's happening isn't why. But when we ask you why is it happening, you're saying the ether band, which kind of takes you out of having to explain why we're seeing it that way. We're what do you call it? Looming, superior mirage, inferior mirage. These are descriptions and explanations for the different type of optics that we're seeing.
No, they're not explanations.
No, they
those
100%
are just.
are.
No, they're not. They're just descriptions. An inferior mirage.
Wait, what's the difference?
Hold on. An inferior mirage is a description of an optical phenomenon. It's not an explanation of why you're seeing.
No, yeah, wait, yes, I can show you right now. So,
Okay.
I'll share it.
If you're going to show me a picture of an inferior mirage, is that what you're going to do?
Nope.
Okay.
It says, an inferior mirage is produced when light rays from an object approaches a hotter region and they're refracted away from the hot area. In the desert mirage, the rays approaching the hot surface are turned upward, away from the surface. If this upward rays are intersected by your eyes, you will see a mirage image appearing below the actual object. Following the pattern of, see, that's an explanation and a description for an inferior mirage.
Okay, if you want, send me that link. I'll look at that definition. But again, your explanation is more words than just inferior mirage. Okay, so like if you and I are
precisely
100%. Yeah, that's what we're trying to explain to you. You're saying that it doesn't.
Right? When you say the inferior mirage is the Aether Band, you haven't explained anything.
I didn't say that. No. That's what I just said to Jose. That's what I just said to Jose. I'm not saying the Aether Band is the inferior mirage. I'm saying that band of air is the cause of the effect.
That band of air is the cause of the effect. The air is causing the inferior mirage. Yes, agreed. And the air is causing the superior mirage. Agreed. Right?
Okay, that's all I mean by Aether Band. Yeah, the Aether Band. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But
okay.
We know how that happens. We know why it happens. We understand optics. We can show and calculate from the density of air how the light will be refracted. We understand these phenomena.
Awesome.
Yeah,
right?
Here's the thing. You're saying Aether Band. Okay, so you say Aether Band. Why is the Aether Band showing us the boat to appear to be floating?
It is hiding the water beneath it.
Right.
Why?
Okay, look.
How?
That's okay. Hold on. That's no different than the floaty man or the floaty land, right? It's a mirrored. It's mirroring the sky. So it's not the same. Okay, hold on. It's not the same color as the water. Okay, it's a light blue, which is the same color as the sky. So at that point, the sky is being mirrored below the boat. Okay, that's all I'm prepared to say. I don't live in your world. I don't have to explain.
You do.
Why?
We live in the same place.
We live in the same world.
Yep.
No, my world is flat. Your world is not.
No. Your belief it's flat, but the world we live on is the same for
the same world.
Okay, so let me ask you this question: that boat that appears to be floating up, the Flying Dutchman boat.
Yeah.
Is that boat physically there?
Again, it's a mirage
Travis,
that is explained.
You're acting like this happens. You're acting like this is the way it is all the time. The conditions have to be exactly perfect for this to actually occur.
No, you're
you
crazy.
realize that,
I have
right?
thousands of pictures. With
but this isn't This isn't a thing that occurs often.
Hang on, Maxwell.
Yes, it does.
No,
Maxwell. Yes, it
Travis.
does.
So
yes,
Travis,
it does, Maxwell.
Travis, in your observations, if you were to actually give us the time of day, the temperature, and the time of year, all the above distances, those all would be explained in one of these miraging explanations. That's what we're trying to say. You're saying it doesn't. You're saying that this isn't explained. It's explained. When we say it's looming,
okay, show me.
I've
show me. No. Don't show me the picture.
Okay.
Show me your numbers. This is what Barney has offered his time to do. Okay, so you're telling me that we have math that can predict that this is going to be the phenomenon. Okay, that's rhetoric.
No,
Show
hang on.
me that.
Let me clarify.
Show me that.
It doesn't predict
There's
anything.
people who does
it
that
doesn't. Hang
even
on.
flat Earth.
It doesn't predict. It explains why that observation is being made. What you're seeing,
Okay.
it explains why it's happening.
Yeah,
It's impossible to say predicts, because you're not going to have all these perfect conditions in one area to predict happening.
What you see here is a mirage.
Okay, so if you go back to the introit that you played earlier that had my oil rig on it, you will see, I think early on, there's a boat that looks like it's in the air. There's no horizon line at all. It was, I think, probably like 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was probably 50 degrees out. But there was no horizon line at all. It was just all sky, and you could see some wake of the boat, but the water that should have been below the boat looked like sky. So, yes. I mean, I'm just saying you can pull that up just to look at it. So what I'm saying to Maxwell is, Maxwell, I get these shots all the time, man. It is common. It happens all the time.
What explains it?
Yes, it is common in the sense that it happens often enough that every one of us has seen it, and if you keep watching across the water, you will see it every so often. How much of the time, on average, is it like that? And how much of the time is it there is no mirage? Right? So a mirage is caused by a specific set of conditions, and each mirage is caused by their own set of conditions, and we know what those conditions are. And those conditions are in line with the physical explanation of optics. And that physical explanation, and those optics are actually so fine-tuned that my glasses work. And you can calculate the refractive index of glass and how thick and how curved it needs to be to correct for the minute distortion in my eye so that I can see. And it's explained by the same formulas, the same mathematics, the same physics as the refraction of the atmosphere, right?
You and I are not, you're right, you and I are not arguing about optical phenomenon. We're arguing about seeing a boat go over a curve. And I'm telling you that if I were talking with someone that wasn't you, I'm talking with someone on the beach, and I get into a conversation about flat Earth, and we talk about that boat that's out on the horizon, and he thinks that it's the curve, I'm going to say, no, it's not the curve. It's only optics.
Okay.
What optics?
Now, yes, precisely. So, having the knowledge of optics, knowing how light deflects from a denser to a rarer medium or the other way around, we know which way the image will go. So when you say that the consistent, persistent vision of the horizon that you see all of the other times when there is not an inferior mirage there, that is also explained by the optics, that clashes with optics.
That's why I'm introducing a new term, because I need to challenge or bring in this new way of looking at things, because that's not a consideration on your end, right?
Okay,
that's where you stop and say, this is as far as we're going to go with the optics. And then I say, yeah, but in my optics, I'm seeing stuff that you're not talking about. And we have to consider this. So again, would you, Barney, would you feel comfortable saying that the boat that Sean had up on from the webpage that looked like it was floating in the air, would you feel comfortable with what I'm asserting, and I've made this assertion with my lighthouse observations, that band of miraging underneath that boat is the obstruction that is blocking the physical water that's actually under the boat so that you can't see it.
But that miraging didn't block any part of the boat.
I'm talking to Barney, please.
No.
I'm talking to Barney, please.
My stream, I'm sorry.
Yes,
My bad.
Okay.
the layer of heated air, of less dense air, which is on the surface of the water, is causing a total interior reflection, and therefore obstructing the water. Yes. Right? It is reflecting the sky. And through that reflection, we cannot see the water. Okay?
Okay. So then that boat is physically on water in that picture. We just can't see the water.
Yes, of course.
Okay. That's
so, Travis,
okay.
Your argument, I think I see where you're going. Your argument is that you can't determine the horizon because by looking at a boat sinking behind the horizon, because what you're saying is that area of Fata Morgana is actually obstructing the view of the boat, but it could be obstructing the view of the boat, which would appear to be the horizon causing curvature, or the vision of curvature. I mean, I'm with you. I could see how that could be possible.
Okay, so yeah, so then if you were to take a Photoshop line and draw a line above the horizon, above the water line, and then drag it up to where the boat is, that's actually the horizon being blocked by the air.
Yes, that's agreed.
Do you mean
fine.
like this image I'm sharing right now? My other account?
No, that's fog.
Well, just
that's fog. Yeah, that's fog.
Okay.
Obscuration is not the same as refraction. There are two effects. One of them is seeing, which is how much the image shimmers and how much the particulates that are in the air which are obscuring the image. And the other is refraction and things getting hidden behind horizons obstructed by physical objects.
Well, nothing gets hidden behind the horizon, Barney.
So, okay, I would like you to, so in my model, I can walk you through it both mathematically, physically, geometrically, show how it works. How is something obstructed and how much, right? And the mirage effects and obstruction by mirage effects are calculated into that. What I cannot in your model do, and it works, and it works as you change the distance, as you approach something or move away from something, as something approaches you and moves away from you, stuff like that. In your model, I can barely glimpse a way where it could work in an instance for one observer, but I cannot generalize that. I cannot see how with that mirage effect, if it's only the mirage effect, if it's only the ether band that is obscuring by mirroring the sky or mirroring whatever, and how does that work? Like, how do you see water obstructing half of a building, but then invoke that it is mirroring of some kind?
Well, it's not always mirroring, Barney. It's squashing, it's compressing, it's stretching, it's magnifying. I've seen at least, I would say, 3 different phenomenons going on: mirroring, squashing, and magnifying in the same shot. And what I'm going to say is,
Chunji, I don't know if you're able to pull the Skype, but I sent you an image, and I don't know if you can pull it up so Travis can break it down really quick here for me. Just a quick example of a day with no inferior mirage going, and see how we can break this down.
So my question is kind of okay, there is some squashing, there is some mirroring, there is some lensing and enlarging. Can you describe that process can you describe that effect in a generalized way so that I can apply it to other images? Can you say what the light is doing? How does that correlate to optics as we know them now? How would it change optics as we know them now? Right?
It's simple. You can't apply any of that stuff to any picture unless you've taken the picture and know the atmospheric conditions of the area that you were taking the picture and the distance that you were taking the picture with the atmospheric conditions of the distance of that picture. So you can't make any justifications about any picture unless you know the conditions that this picture was taken in, first of all. So it's pointless to argue about any pictures that nobody has taken by themselves unless they know the atmospheric conditions and it's
I see.
ridiculous.
I see you're presenting the picture I sent you, Sean-G. This is the famous little lighthouse that I took. And it's a little bit of blink test that I added. Just the whole lighthouse, what should be there, but it's not. Because we can only, in the actual screenshot of the video, it's just the top of the lighthouse, one blue stripe, one white stripe, and then underneath that is a series of trees, like a little tree line, and then the water is there. So there's a little bit of a band of trees, which it might be blocking that blue stripe, but then we're still missing 1, 2, 3, about 4 stripes, plus a little bit of land where the lighthouse is sitting on. And this is water.
Yeah, Jose.
What is going on here?
I made comments on this video that I don't think ever got addressed, and that's fine because life is the way it is, and I don't answer everybody on my comment section either. But I watched this video, and I evaluated what I saw, and I posted my questions to you that came to my mind as a result of looking at it. Those would have been the questions that I would like to have been addressed.
Yeah. You think in a quick summary, in a nutshell, we're looking at this. I'm standing 15 to 20 foot tall, probably I say 15 foot tall, or what the camera is to the ground. And then this lighthouse is about 17 and a half miles away, and we're just missing all of that. I mean, it's kind of there in our face.
I think from what I remember, I think that my criticism would have been, I would have expected the lighthouse to be a lot smaller, and the blink test lighthouse that you provided, I believe I asked this question: what was the distance of that lighthouse when that picture was taken? Because those aren't the same, they aren't taken from the same location. So the blink test image was taken from a different location by, if it wasn't you, a different person. So how far?
No. Yeah, this could be any size, this could be any distance, any size. I just magnify the lighthouse so I can make it the same side by side to see what I am missing. Because if I take a picture of me that I can see top to bottom in the camera, and somebody take a picture of me from really far, I'm gonna minimize the picture from close, and I'm gonna put them side by side just to do a comparison, just to see if anything is really big distorted or what. But it's just a blink test.
I guess my question would be to ask everybody here: are you comfortable with what Jose just said he would do?
Yeah,
Yep.
because all the lighthouse are the same width. They are the same width. That's how he makes his comparison.
So,
I'm not comfortable with it.
yes, it would not be perfect if it was taken from too close. There would be some foreshortening because it was being photographed up. It was not being photographed orthographically. Yeah. And that would actually make the case even worse. The lighthouse should actually be a bit stretched out horizontally if it was taken from too close. But that actually makes the case worse for you. Same thing with
what I tried to
what I try to do in here, really quick, sorry to interrupt, Barney. I mean, luckily and gladly and happily that there are stripes in the lighthouse, and there's very solid blue and white stripes, and that gave me the power to do it more accurately, you know, on the measuring, you know, on the comparison side by side.
That's awesome. I've never seen this. And my question is, where?
Hey guys, can I just? Sorry, Carlos. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead, buddy.
I just want to add something that's a little bit off topic, but a new word was added to the dictionary this month.
Thank you, Sean.
And it's deep state.
Let's see.
These what?
Really?
Why would you do that?
He's just proving
How is that relevant? How is that relevant to the conversation that we're having?
I said it's something irrelevant.
It's going to take that long.
Yes, but why? Why bring up something that has nothing to do with what we're talking about?
Oh, sorry. I was just looking into how long it takes something to get into the dictionary about his Aether Band thing.
Right. Yeah. It takes some time.
So the Aether Band.
Yep.
Air, right? Atmosphere.
Probably going to take forever.
Yeah, the problem is you had the word ether in it. Like,
that's not a problem, guys. You guys got to loosen up a little bit. It's if you look up the word ether in Wikipedia, the very first definition is air. That's all it means. Yeah, air.
Very well.
And Aether Band is a layer of air.
Yep.
Literally. Yeah, fine. As I said, I'm perfectly fine with you using that term as long as I know what it means. I asked you what it means. You gave somewhat of a vague definition, which I can only understand as, well, it's the atmosphere, and okay, then it's the atmosphere, it's the air, fine. And when we're talking about the effects of the Aether Band, we're talking about the atmospheric effects. That's fine. That's just a word. The content of the word is understood and communicated. I don't care that you can call it Bobby for all I care. As long as I understand what you're saying, what that means.
What kind of atmospheric phenomenon do we
Barney.
see in this picture?
You're going to see the buildings in the distance are being compressed with the apparent horizon.
I think this is a cargo ship.
What
This is a
buildings?
these are containers.
What buildings?
Containers in top of the cargo ship.
And,
Are
okay, let me say
containers.
something before I ask the question again. In this footage, it's a video. The waves, you can see some of the containers are revealed and then obscured again. And through that, you can compare the height of the containers. There's no compression. All the containers are seen with the same height.
yeah, what's the rest
Yeah,
of it?
I mean, if you want to pull up my looming
No,
freighter.
let's talk about this big.
I know, but what I'm saying is that you can use mine as a comparison as well. So what I'm telling you is, and I don't think anybody can answer this question, guys. This is where, in my world, we have to say, I don't know. But what I am telling you that I do know is the reason why you can't see the bottom of that ship is because the Aether Band is swallowing it up in compression.
Okay, it has to be swallowing it up in such a way that it suddenly starts swallowing up the ship, swallows a part of the ship, and then brings up the sea to the point where it's swallowed up. But it doesn't distort the ship above or the sea below. It just compresses the image in between to an infinitesimal line. Now that is a very that is a very peculiar lens that you were describing, and that would you can. So
think you can make either determination. If you had a better
you can
picture
do
of
that.
Wait, Barney's still
if you
speaking,
had
guys.
a-
Barney's speaking.
Wait,
Maxwell, please. Let
You
Barney.
can do that.
I just
you
wanted
can
to make
do
a
that
simple
with
point.
You can do that with a Fresnel lens, right? You can produce that image with a Fresnel lens if you have a particular Fresnel lens for that observer, but only that observer. If you move closer, you will with a Fresnel lens, you will not see it slowly rise. you will see a completely different picture, right? If you move away, if you move to the side, the image is going to change. Now, for that one observer, you can explain it with an effect such as a Fresnel lens, but that doesn't work as a generalized explanation of what we see, because this is a video, and the guy standing next to him or standing 500 meters away from him would also see the ship going behind the corner, behind the horizon. And if you were in a boat in between, you would see it be elevated. Now, what is the mechanism? What is that atmospheric effect that can produce that? That's literally antithetical to optics. That's impossible under optics.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It would help.
I'm here.
That's why I was going to make the point that it would help if you could see the other boat that's closer to you and make the determination of whether that's actually up higher than it's supposed to be or lower, depending on the cargo that it's carrying. But you can't determine what is going on here either way.
But you can see
That's
it.
irrelevant.
Right. Well, you can see it very well in the consequent bridge, the causeway.
Listen, let's just stay on this photo. When Sean was going through my intro, when Sean was going through my intro video and got to the very end, I've got this same phenomenon with my oil rig. So, like you're seeing the top of this freighter, and all you're seeing is the top of the freighter. In my last picture, all you're seeing is the top rigging of the oil rig. The entire body of the oil rig is gone. But the one thing I will add is the rigging that you can see is magnified. It's bigger because it's like 15 miles away. There's no way it's that size.
Well, what do you have to compare with?
That's ridiculous.
I can't hear whoever's talking.
If you're trying to make a claim, all the supporting evidence is relevant. Period. There's nothing irrelevant about not knowing more information about what the hell you're looking at.
My question was, how do you know it's magnified? What is your reference in order to make that determination?
How do I know what?
That it is magnified. You said it's magnified. But what is your reference? Did you calculate
if Sean would put into the chat the link for my opening video, you can watch the 6 other images that I have of the same oil rig shot at the same distance with the same focal length, and you can see the rigging different sizes, smaller, larger. So there's no way to tell how big it is. It's 15 miles away. That size of the oil rig that we're looking at, that's not the actual size. Okay?
Well, that's what you call rhetoric, though, Travis. I mean,
it's not rhetoric because I have pictures to show you.
You can say that. You can say that, but we don't have any way of knowing it.
What's wrong with this picture?
Big Blue, listen to me. Okay, listen to me. Let me just say this real quick, okay? So guess what, Big Blue? I'm the guy that's going to break this wide open. Or I'm the guy that's going to try to break this wide open and I'm going to fail, okay? But I'm the guy.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, you've been Wycliffe and Copernicus already tonight. Who else?
At least you're confident.
Hiding in there.
So just look at the couple of images of that oil rig and see that the atmosphere squashes it, stretches it, completely misshapes it so that you can't even tell what it is.
Yeah, we know that. It happens all the time. That's
right. So then
and we know why it happens, though. That's the
that's what's happening with this freighter.
We understand
that's what's
exactly.
happening with this freighter.
No, that's not what's happening. This freighter is beyond the horizon.
No,
it's not.
I said in the beginning. Watch the waves. The waves obscure some containers and then reveal them again. So if you
I'm telling you that the atmosphere, the air, the ether band is one crazy fucking phenomenon that you cannot predict what it's going to
cannot
do.
prove.
Okay, so what you're saying is
Yeah,
that
I
the Aether
can.
Band,
I
the
can.
Aether Band is so crazy that it just makes the Earth appear to be a
Yeah.
globe when in fact it's really flat. That's what you're saying.
No, it's no, because I don't think it makes it appear to look like a globe at all. It doesn't look like a globe to me. I see something straight in front of me. I believe it's straight in front of me. I believe I can see it because it's straight in front of me. How well I can see it is changed by the crazy, maniacal Aether Band.
Okay,
Do
this
you
is
know
what you
that's
were
called
talking
magic?
Excuse me?
That's the classification of magic.
Okay, that's how we feel about your description of gravity. So back at you, big guy.
So this pictures here are all the same oil rig?
Well, hang on.
So
You keep saying description. They're not descriptions, they're explanations.
Whatever.
I see the pictures and I see that this oil rig stretches up and down. Is that like a time lapse?
I have some of those might have been screenshots of video, but if
I still don't see any proof of magnification.
I actually hold on. Actually, I don't think that any of those are from video because I labeled them because they were all the same focal length, and with the P900, the only time you get focal length is with stills. But if you want to back the video up, I go through each of those shots is a build-up for the money shot at the end, and they all have timestamps on them, and they are all taken from the same beach, same location, same distance, same focal length, and there's nothing uniform about them. So go back to that one that I put in those photos.
Yeah, there's a lot of mirage.
Go back.
Yeah, but not being
to that one that
it's magnified. You keep saying it's magnified, magnification. And that's not what I'm seeing.
I think he means stretch it.
Well, stretch, distorted, and magnified are three different things.
Okay, stop right there. Stop right there. Okay, so the bottom yellow line is the apparent horizon. The yellow line above that is cutting.
It's the actual horizon.
Well, not really, because that would place that oil rig underwater. Because I've got pictures with the rigging or with the pilings, right? So I'm cutting it in half because that's what the Mirage is. I'm cutting it in half because
underwater. It is make that right there.
It is slightly higher. It's the actual horizon.
Okay, so the blue box is to demark what you see at the very last image. You only see those top riggings, and then the red arrow, and then the red arrow shows you what's missing. Right.
So what was the tide height when you took the last photo?
I don't really care.
He doesn't have that. That's okay. Carry on. Let him carry on.
So go back to that one. Go back to the one right before. It'll be that one right there. So you can see the pilings. No, yeah. It's the one with the salmon colored sky. That one. That's like at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you can see the rig. You can see the pilings, right? So you can see the posts on which the oil rig, and then in the other ones you don't see it. It's blended in. So I'm just giving you, disparate images.
Well, you're kind of leaving out an important factor there. I mean, time is kind of an important factor with tides.
Time?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, hold on. Tango, Igloo, Michael, Echo? Or Tango, Igloo, Delta, Echo?
Delta.
Tides, time, they both correlate.
Yeah, the tide doesn't matter to me because I've had the tide up at my feet. I've had it down. That makes no difference to me.
Well, it makes difference to what you're looking at, though.
No, but
well, never mind then.
Wait,
Well, how the hell can you make that determination, Travis, if you don't freaking include it in
Data.
your...
Because all I'm interested in is what I see, and
I can say I'm going to cook an
changing.
egg, but I'm not going to know how. I'm going to just throw out heat because that's irrelevant to me.
Right. Okay.
But
So
how the hell am I going to cook the damn egg?
Maxwell.
What the hell, dude?
Okay, listen. When I started looking into this, and I could not find out how high the oil rig was off the water, so how long or how tall those pilings were. When I couldn't get that information, I stopped caring about the tides. Okay, if someone can find me the information on where the body of the oil rig, how high it is off of the water, then I'll start to care about the tide. Because listen to me, Maxwell, if the tide is out 15 feet and I can't see, like in the last image, the entire oil rig is buried underwater, right? 15 feet isn't gonna, so if you're telling me, well, the 15 feet, the tide was up 15 feet, okay? 15 feet of water isn't gonna bury the oil rig. So technically,
it's going to vary the mirage effect, though.
But I know that.
It could vary both quite drastically.
But I know
so
that.
It seems to be an important factor to have in your equations.
No. I'm not making equations. See, that's it, Maxwell. I'm not making equations.
okay.
You want to make
what
equations.
are you doing? What is your problem? Like, why? How does this confirm the flat Earth, or disprove the globe Earth, or the sphere Earth, or do anything except raise your epistemic uncertainty? And when I say your, I literally mean your, because from what I know about optics and from what I know about refraction, this is perfectly fine. This is what you would expect to see on the globe Earth with varying air density.
Well, then that doesn't make sense to me when you say this is being obscured by the horizon, because none of my pictures have a horizon obscuring the oil rig. And by that, I mean the oil rig is behind and below and beyond the horizon line. So that becomes the defining line.
How is this not being obscured by a horizon?
Oh my God! If it's okay, go back to the immediate image. Whoever has this, okay, that is the same oil rig from the same distance.
Yes.
It's not obscured by the horizon.
What do you mean it's not obscured by the horizon?
What?
This
That's
is
not
what
obscured
right now. This right now, and then the other one.
What would be your definition of obscured?
Okay, maybe we're talking past each other. Okay, maybe we're talking past each other.
I hope so. Okay.
Can I say something about this image specifically?
Yes.
Okay, this image is what we should see, and there is no refraction in this image. Refraction is minimal. The other images that we see the whole oil rig, we can see it because of refraction.
So I would say that if you calculated the geometrical obscuration by the horizon, if you discounted the horizon, if you discounted the refraction completely, you would see slightly less than this.
Well, my point is, how do we know that we don't see because of refraction instead of we see because of refraction? I mean, we see the whole thing because of refraction. Who can say I'm wrong?
I don't believe that I take as narrow a definition of refraction as you. So, Barney, because you were here earlier, right? Remember we talked about the sailboat that was like the Flying Dutchman, right?
Yes.
and we were both comfortable that the band of mirroring or miraging underneath obscured the water.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying is happening right now with the oil rig.
Okay.
The ether band, atmosphere, air is doing the same thing. It's just not a mirage. It's just not a mirror. It's raising up the horizon line and blocking. So, like, let's pretend, for instance, Barney. Let's do this. Let's pretend we got Photoshop and painted a 1/4 inch of blue sky below this, and said, "Look, the ether band is making a mirror and it's blocking the oil rig." It's the same result, but it's a different phenomenon. That's what I'm saying.
So there is a big difference between setting a reflective layer on top of something and reflecting light, right? Reflecting what's behind it and creating a brand new image, which is not a reflection of anything, and then using that image to cover something else up, right?
But that's what's happening, Barney.
Okay, so where is the image of this sea coming from?
Where is
right?
it?
In the other image, when we were talking about the reflecting layer obscuring the sea up to the boat, I can show you on that image the part of the sky that is getting reflected in the mirage, so that you can see it. It is optically there, and everything that is reflected has to be optically there. Where is this being reflected from?
That is a technical issue that I'm ready to start working through to explain. I haven't done it yet, but I'm comfortable with my understanding that it's not. I mean, I understand the question, because it's like we don't see reflection, right? We don't see reflection. We don't see mirroring here. But that becomes a requirement to find an explanation or a description of what I'm calling compression. You know, it's I don't know what other term to use. It's swallowing up. It's compressing. It's hiding the whether or not. Okay, I don't know. Like let's say, for instance, if we drew another Photoshop line.
You actually have.
Hold on, just real quick. Let me finish my thought. I don't want to lose it. If we draw another Photoshop line on the apparent horizon in that one, and then drop it down a 1/4 inch, I'll say that's where the mirroring starts. It just looks like it's water. We think that that's.
But how do you know that's where it starts?
Because we have to interpret what we see, and I've seen enough images where I can show you. Look at what's happening here. That is not physical water. That's optical. And
but that doesn't happen every day.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So this is the kind of distortion that you are talking about in the opposite direction. This part of the oil rig has been lensed and stretched out by the distortion in the atmosphere, right? So
okay.
You can have the
it looks like it's mirrored to me.
It's not mirrored because you can see the legs below it. So
there's a box below the legs as well, like that? I don't think so.
Yeah, but why isn't the head? Hold on, Maxwell. Why isn't the head mirrored? Right? It's just the body that's mirrored. I mean, I don't have a problem with what you're saying, Maxwell. But then I would say we're seeing something that's MF and crazy, because the ether band is mirroring the body, but not the head.
Well, you see the same effect with the Fata Morgana. So, I mean, you see a floating, right there, it looks like you see a floating oil rig mirrored, which makes it look like the oil rig is actually standing up higher than it should be.
Right, but Maxwell.
Where do you see it mirrored?
Hold on, right. But Maxwell, Right now, we have a divergent opinion because Barney isn't interpreting it the same way. So guess what I'm going to say to you? There's no way for either of you to definitively prove your point. You can't do it. You can interpret and say, this is what I think is happening. But like Barney is saying, like, where do you see that? I'm not seeing that. So
Okay, bring up a clear image of the oil rig that we can definitively define lines.
The one
Yeah.
with the cranes only. No, not this one. One having the cranes only above the water.
Oh, that's not going to inform us about the shape of the oil rig.
Okay, that's pretty good. So it doesn't appear to be mirrored. It just appears to be looming. Right? I will agree that it appears to be looming instead of mirrored.
So, how I would argue about what I'm seeing. So, there are the legs of the rig. This is the head, which has protrusions on the side and cranes, right? These are the legs. There are protrusions on the side. So when we look at the stretched out image, the one that I think is stretched out,
Yeah,
you can still see the legs at the bottom. You don't see a reflection of the cranes, and you don't see, sorry, see the legs. You don't see a reflection of the cranes, and you don't see this protrusion being mirrored. So I wouldn't say that there is a line here mirroring this down. I would say that the central body is being stretched out.
Yeah, and the top is it looks like the top's being compressed as well.
Right. So
Yeah.
you've got compression and extension in the same
Yes.
image. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so that's fine. I absolutely can agree that this effect is possible because it acts as a distorted lens, as though this part is compressed, this is stretched, and there is a gradual transition from normal to compressed to stretched to, right? But when you look at, where is it? At this image, you would need to get sudden infinite compression that compresses this, that compresses the whole rig that you saw to zero, but that doesn't distort this and doesn't distort this, right?
It's all distorted.
To make it disappear.
No, it's all distorted, Barney. If you look at the two top antenna or the two top cranes, they are not at the same angle as the ones in the previous. The other angles are obtuse. This is an acute angle, right? And not only that, but because that's the same focal length, right? You'd have to put those two images next to each other and see that the cranes aren't even the same pixel size. They're
You do
We are
realize
literally seeing what's in this blue. We are literally seeing what is in this blue square here. You have actually highlighted it, right?
You realize those cranes can move, don't you?
I didn't hear that if somebody was talking.
Okay, so look at the cranes in the.
There's just one crane.
There's a.
No, but I'm talking about the top two antennas.
Look at this thing in the blue square here, right?
Yeah.
That thing and these things which are protruding here are the same things. Agreed?
Correct. Yep.
And they look the same.
No, that's an obtuse angle and the other one's acute.
How is this an obtuse to what?
It's a wider angle than the next one that you're going to see. You can totally tell that that's a tighter angle.
But you said these photos were taken at the same distance, at the same location.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So what changed the angle?
The atmosphere, the ether band.
But your distance is still the same.
Go back again. Keep going back and forth.
Wait. Plain truth. I have already agreed on the basis of this image, right? That
I mean, look
yes,
at that
of
one.
course
See?
you can.
Look at that one.
Of course,
that one's got a wider.
Of course, you can have a distortion. You can have it stretched in one part and compressed in the other. But for this image to be the image of the same object would mean that you have a distortion of the upper part, which you do, that's fine, and then an infinite compression of everything that's below it, and then a distortion of the sea for everything else to disappear. Right?
Yeah.
Do you now understand
So
what I'm
basically what we
talking
have-
about?
Yeah, but I don't have a problem with saying that there is an optical phenomenon that's happening because of the air. Okay, it's the same thing as if we were to put a blink test, right? I just didn't do a blink test. I didn't take one of my other images of the oil rig and put it up next to this one and show you how much is behind the curve. Because
I'm
listen,
so glad I don't live by the ocean. I would never leave until I figured this shit out.
So yeah. In the statement of, well, it's an atmospheric effect, I somewhat agree with you, but I know of no atmospheric effect, and I don't see how one could be physically possible that would make a part of the picture be cut out.
That's why I'm here.
So now, that's why you're here. What I need from you, if that's why you're here, what I need from you is an explanation of how that is possible, which is an explanation, which is not just a statement of, well, it is the atmosphere. Because of those effects that I do know about the atmosphere, I actually understand how they work. I understand why this image looks like this on round Earth, and this one looks like this, and this one looks like this. Like, I understand all of the effects in those images on a round Earth, with parts of the image being obscured by the horizon and the looming effect of refraction bringing it slightly up. I cannot for the life of me figure out how you could get this on a flat Earth with any effect.
No, Travis, what I said was, I'm glad I don't live by the ocean, because I would never leave that spot until I fucking figured out what the hell was going on.
Yeah. I know. Tell me about it. I know. That's why I say this all the time. This would be a full-time job. You would have to spend every day, 6 o'clock to 6 at night, with your camera rolling the entire time.
When you say that's why I'm here, and then you say, well, it's the atmosphere, that didn't explain anything, and then you say, well, I am about to figure this out. But how are you about to figure this out? You came here now to tell me about it and to tell me what the conclusion of your research is going to be.
I didn't say that I'm about to figure it out.
Yes, you did.
Okay, well, I'll have to go back. I don't remember saying I'm about to.
Okay. Maybe I misunderstood you. Fair enough.
That's okay. But, yeah, I mean, again, I don't live in a world where I have to have explanations for these things. So, like, even though we can label Fata Morganas and inferior mirages and we can give descriptions, I still think that those are insufficient insofar as they go. They're still only descriptions. They don't actually they don't really explain things. The air is hotter.
No, Travis,
please
stop.
The air is hotter than the water.
No, let him finish.
But that's the thing.
Let him finish.
They clearly explain what we're observing. They do not. It's not just a word like Aether Band. It's explaining what is happening. It's explaining why it's happening. It's very clear.
The mechanism, the conditions, the variables required, it is in line with all the other optics that you're using, the lens in your camera, the lens in my glasses, like all of it is one consistent, coherent whole, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess this is where in this whole big discussion, I'm sure you guys have heard it said this way, but
Okay.
I don't need to come up with an explanation that I think makes sense, because I have no way of verifying it, guys. Even your description of the Fata Morgana can't be verified. Do you know why? Because you can't isolate what you're seeing and then go and see it in proximity, because it will change. Because distance. Okay, so let me ask you this. I just thought of this right now. I'm not trying to be smartass or anything like that. In any of your explanations, Sean, of Fata Morganas or whatever, is distance an included variable of the explanation?
Yes, it's got to be. Here's what I would do. Here's what Travis. Here's what I would do if I was in your shoes
Maxwell,
taking these pictures.
Buddy. Maxwell, please hold on. When you say it's gotta be, the first thing that tells me is you don't know. Now it might be.
No. The more information you have, the better.
Right, but I'm asking Sean that when he read me the explanation of the Fata Morgana or the inferior mirage from earlier, and he talked about temperature and water temperature and humidity, was distance part of that explanation? Because if it wasn't, that would be my first criticism of a tremendous failure to incorporate into the explanation, which then to me means however long that explanation of Fata Morgana has been around without distance in the equation, it's been wrong.
Why would distance be in the equation?
Because when you get closer or farther away, what you're seeing changes.
Due to what?
Distance.
No, due to what?
Either
what changes
you're increasing. Okay, so if I'm 15 miles away from oil rig Gina, right?
Yep.
If I'm 15 miles away from oil rig Gina and
you just cut out big time.
Okay, so to the statement that we cannot test this on a small scale where we can actually take accurate measurements and see it up close. And so this is a recording of a hot roof
temperature is
of a car.
68. I'm not gonna.
Oh, you're back. You've cut out for like a minute.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yes.
For a good minute.
Yeah.
Oh man, I hate bridges.
Did we miss your monologue?
Well, I hope it wasn't a monologue. I was answering a question, right? Okay, so I'm sorry. So you asked me why distance comes into play, right? So my answer was, if you know that oil rig Gina is 15 miles away, and if you know that the air temperature is 72, and that the water temperature is 68, and that the humidity is 90, and that there's a slight 3-knot breeze, how far away are you from Gina? Because the distance is the variable that you can control. And the farther away from you Gina is, you're increasing the density of the air. You're increasing that distance, which then adds to the density of the air. If you get right up next to Gina in a boat, you're going to see...
Not the density, the quantity.
Okay, however it makes you happy to understand the same concept. The air density is changed by...
No, it's not.
Okay.
The air's density changes it. So if the air is...
Well, okay, I'm sorry. How about this?
Just say that the volume of density.
Yeah, the amount of air.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Didn't
That's
think
fine.
it right.
That's fine. Okay. So that's why distance matters, Sean.
Okay. So Do you think that can we replicate these effects on a small scale?
No.
Okay, so here's a video of a car in the sun, like summer sun in the morning. And I'm sorry it's shaky, but I think you can see the distortion of the thin layer of the hot air right next to the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's at a distance of half a meter, where I can go and take measurements of the temperature of the car, of the density of the air, of all of these things, and clearly see the refraction due to just the density change due to the proximity of a hot plate. You can do this experiment at home with your stove if it's cold enough, right?
Okay.
So we can replicate effects of atmospheric distortion without going to, like, we can scale these down.
Okay, but Barney, the reason why I said no is because your demonstration right now is not an ocean. It's not the same.
So
It's not
Travis,
the same.
can I explain to you what I was?
We've been through this part of the discussion yesterday. Yes, you can always say something is different, but do the optics change?
I think that's
do the optics change? Are the laws of optics different at large scale than they are at small scale?
Yes.
In which way?
Distance and angles. I mean, if you go up higher, if you go up lower, you're changing those variables. So yes, the optics change.
Yeah, distance is an independent variable.
I'm not
Yes.
sure why that changes anything.
Because you can get into a boat and take this measurement from closer and farther and compare them to a model of a Fresnel lens, or compare them to the model of standard optics and see which one coincides. And if it coincides with standard optics, then it's standard optics.
Listen, I don't need to make a model of seeing Gina over 15 miles of the ocean. I just look at Gina over 15 miles of the ocean. Because if I make a model, it's not the same, guys. It's not.
Yes, but you can take measurements of Gina itself.
Here's what you do, Travis. Check this out. You go to your, I'm sure there's an airport, a local, small, tiny airport nearby.
Yep.
Oil rig Gina. You go to that airport in the morning or whatever time you're going to go take a picture or video of this oil rig. You get the weather report. It gives you all the information that you need to know about temperatures at different elevations and humidity and dew point and all that crap. And then you go take your video, and then when you go do it again, you get the same thing. Then you got all this compiling evidence and information that shows you the difference of density of air, the temperatures of air at certain elevations, and then you can compare your data with your visual observation and come up to a conclusion that it's probably refraction.
Right?
Okay,
that's the whole point. And then you say,
Barney,
I don't have.
Barney,
wait, and then you say, go ahead.
Barney, yeah, please. I'm sorry. Okay, Maxwell, listen. I know that you laughed at the end of that by saying that it's probably refraction, right? Okay. If I go out, and I've done it in general, if I go out and like this last week, the air temperature and the water temperature in the morning were very close. It was like 68 degrees and 72, right? Not that bad. And the humidity was 90, okay? I know that. I know what those temperatures were on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday because I bothered to look at my app and find out what my app told me, and I trusted my app. Okay. And then I took pictures. Okay.
Well, that's
and then on Thursday, I got what I got. On Friday, I got what I got, and on Saturday, I got what I got. All I know is I see different things on different days, and the temperature is pretty close together, but they were never the same results. That to me isn't very hard to figure out that it doesn't matter.
Well, it does matter because the atmospheric conditions have to be at a certain way for this mirage or effect to happen.
No. But part of that's okay. Part of what you said right now is true. Part of it is true. But this is what I said to whoever it was on Jose's show the other day. If I go out on 360, if I go out at 9 o'clock in the morning every day and don't miss a beat, I'm going to have 365 different images. It's not going to do anything.
Yes. And then you
But it creates a dependent variable.
And then you find what is it that has changed between those images and try to find the best correlation that you have.
I don't care.
You don't have the
stuff.
time.
That's you. No.
Yeah.
I have the time, but that's what you care about because you have to have an answer to prove that there's a curve. I don't. I'm just looking at an object that I believe is there. It's there. It's physically, okay?
Yes, I also believe that it's physically there.
Okay, at 5.85 miles away from me, it's directly in front of me. And at 9 miles away, those buildings and those houses are directly in front of me physically. And at hold on,
here's
hold on,
a question,
let me finish. My last
Travis.
little shot was
Go ahead. No, let him finish.
And at 20 miles away, the Anacapa Island is directly physically in front of me. The only thing that's changing is the atmosphere.
Okay, so wait.
Are you using autofocus? Are you using autofocus or are you using manual focus?
I use auto.
Well, that could be a what's screwing stuff up.
Okay.
Well, no, that's not going to explain the thing disappearing behind the curve. Come on, that's a red herring.
Yeah, I didn't want to argue with you, but yeah.
So the problem with that is that the last statement is conjecture. You are making series of huge jumps without connecting them, and then coming to the conclusion. Wait. I don't want to stop because you have told me to let you speak, and I've let you speak. Right. So I fully understand that you think it works that way. I fully accept that you are convinced of it. But if you are going to convince me, you have to show me how it works. I have to be able to gain your understanding. Now, you say that you don't know how it works. Fair enough. But on multiple occasions, you have said, we cannot know how it works. Now, that's the part where I have a problem, because I know how it works. I have an explanation for all of the effects that you're seeing. The things that you say are right in front of you, I don't see them as right in front of me. From what I know, they're behind a curve, and they are being loomed by atmospheric effects, which are measurable, known, and predictable.
Right.
Now, when I say measurable, known, and predictable, I don't mean in every detail. I cannot tell you, I cannot predict each individual shimmer, just as I cannot predict every individual wave on the ocean, but I can predict what the sea level is. I can calculate what the average sea level is. I can calculate what the average looming effect is, and if you give me enough information, the more information I have, I can increase my accuracy. The fact that I can increase my accuracy with more information informs me that if I had all the information, I could get the perfect prediction. Now, if you can give me an explanation which will lead me in that direction in your world, then your world will start making sense to me. But if you're just saying, well, this makes sense to me, but I am not going to figure it out, and it's your thing to figure things out, then all I can say is, well, then you're not interested in the shape of the Earth, and you're not interested in the optic phenomena that you're filming. All that you're interested in is coming here and asserting your conjectures.
No.
And
listen,
you do not have an argument for what you're claiming, for what your primary claim is.
Okay, listen. I hear what you're saying. The thing that differentiates coming up with an explanation for the phenomenon that I'm observing and taking pictures of is I cannot manipulate anything, like 99% of it. I can't. Barney, I would have to make up a story. I would have to make it up. I would have to say, I think that it might be this, and I got to say this in a way that would make it sound plausible, and so that Barney would believe it. I would be making shit up, man. There's no way.
I respect you for not making shit up. That's true, right?
I mean, first of all,
speculating is not merely making shit up. I wouldn't mind if you speculated, and then we could work out a way to test it experimentally to see how does your speculation coincide with the things that we do know about physics, with the things that we do know about the world, right?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then I'm sorry, it's wrong. If it doesn't, the thing that Feynman said, right? It doesn't matter who you are, and that cuts both ways. It doesn't matter how famous you are or infamous. It doesn't matter how smart or stupid you are. It doesn't matter how much you know or don't know. If your speculation does not coincide with experiment, then you're wrong.
Yeah, okay. What I hear happening is this. I'm telling you that I made a girl smile, and you're telling me I want you to explain how you did it. And I just want you to be impressed that I made her smile, dude. You know what I mean? That's all I'm caring about. I really, honestly do not care about explaining how I'm capturing the images that I'm capturing. I don't care. I'm just taking pictures that I find amazing. I do not have to explain them.
But if you do, so you're in a flat Earth debate channel, right? And you're presenting yourself as the plain truth, revealing the truth to the world that the world is flat.
No disrespect, Travis, but great pictures. But I mean, it's usually about 90% operator error. So, I mean, for you to exclude wanting to know exactly how the camera is set up, where it's set, and stuff like that is, I mean, that's pretty important.
Well, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, Maxwell. I didn't say that I don't care where I set the camera up. I mean, I know where I'm setting it up, and I'm leveling out the legs, and I mean, what is it that you're trying to make a point of in terms of? I'm saying my.
Anybody can go snap a picture of something and then come up with 120 different pictures of the same thing with the same spot that you said you took it at, but that doesn't rule out operator error.
But you would
if you're not documenting and doing stuff the exact same way with the exact same settings every single time, that's gonna be a huge factor in why you're getting different pictures. It's not going to be the total obvious discrepancies that you see, but there's going to be discrepancies, and it can contribute to what your discrepancies are. That's all I'm saying. No.
Well, no, I hear what you're saying, Maxwell, and I appreciate the way that you're addressing the issue. When you say it could be operator error, my question to you is why are you saying that? Is there something that you've seen?
Because that's the first thing that you usually exclude during a scientific experiment. I mean, that's what you're trying to exclude operator error.
Right. Okay. So
First of
here's
all, I
right.
mean,
Right.
and I mean, otherwise, there's no point in doing the damn experiment.
Right.
If you're not going to make sure that stuff is done thoroughly and as correctly as possible, then you might as well not even do it.
Right. So here's where I'm at. Right now, I'm only at the observation level, right? So I haven't gotten to a point to where I'm making experimental hypotheses and tests. So if I get to that level, I would agree with you that the accuracy and focus needs to be more precise. But right now,
You have
I'm just taking
permanent
pictures.
hypothesis, Travis.
No, he doesn't. What he
That
is
the Earth
doing.
is flat.
Wait. Travis, just hear me out and then tell me if I'm anywhere in the ballpark.
Okay.
What you're doing and what you're trying to do, it is not science. It is poetry. It is a performance art. It is creativity. You're trying to do lateral thinking, think differently, discard everything that's been thought, think up new words, and interpret things freely from the soul, not from the mind.
Okay.
Does that resonate with you? Would you agree with that statement?
I mean, I'd like to think that I'm creative, artistic, imaginative, ambitious to express those things and communicate those things. Yeah, but I think that going into the area of what Maxwell was saying, that when you cross the line, like, taking the pictures that I'm taking and making connections and thinking about things, and in my own video presentations saying, I think that this is what's going on. Those are generic musings that aren't precise and aren't past creative thought yet. So that when, as I said to Maxwell, once and if and when I cross that line, then that creativity, I think, will have to take a backseat for a more analytical and sterile and clinical approach, where it needs to be more precise. Does that go in?
Yeah.
Does that okay?
Yes, and I expect that when you finally get to that point, that I will see you where I see Sean G right now. Right? When you get all the pieces of data that you need, that it will all click together and you will see why the Earth has to be round and it cannot possibly be otherwise.
Well, I hope, in all honesty, that well, I don't know why I wouldn't be honest if I came across information. So here I will say this. How about this? When I was researching the gyro compass today, and I was reading through one of the entries, I said to myself, if the point that they're making can be demonstrated, okay? So the entry was simply a diagram, so it wasn't real, and it wasn't a picture, it was a diagram. And then you had an explanation of what the diagram represented. So I said to myself, if what they're saying is true and can be demonstrated, I believe that's proof of the curvature and
Yes.
rotation. Okay?
Yes.
So, but at that point in the study that I got to, they hadn't proven anything. They're just asserting, and that means nothing.
And proof is in the pudding.
So that's what I'm
Proof of
expecting.
the pudding is in the eating. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, but I want to let you know that as I was looking at that, I said out loud, on the record, if this is true, I don't see how it can't not prove the rotation.
Well, there's lots of videos of the actual thing.
And if you want proof of that, you need to figure out how momentum works and how torque works. And those are things which are trivial. That they do require some study, but they're trivial to understand. And then when you build a gyro compass and see what it does, and it's significantly harder than it seems. You do have problem solving when you try to build one for yourself. But yes, the calculations and the effect, they come together, and the better you do it, they come better together, right? It's eliminating the things that are obscuring the clarity of the data. But that literally the thing that I'm describing is what scientific research is. It is that thing of oh damn it, I want to know this, but reality is getting in my way by making it hard to measure small sizes. How can I measure more precisely? Well, I can exclude this. How can I eliminate other hypotheses? How can I make this thing be conclusive as much as I possible? That's what draws me. That the reason why I know all the things that I know about these things is that curiosity. Like, fuck you for telling me that it's round. I want to know that it's round. I don't want to be told. I don't want to know that somebody has determined that it's round. I want to know that it's round, right?
Yeah. Hey,
and the gyro compass and the Aristotle's experiment are the things that and sorry, the Cavendish experiment are the things that I've done and confirmed for myself, and that they work that way. And that thing that I'm doing with you, like, I don't know if I can do that. I have an idea of how it could be done. I don't know how well it will work, but based on what I know so far, yes, I fully am convinced and expect that I'll be able to approximate the result enough to beat the standard geometrical curvature and the standard refraction at STP, right? That I can actually tell the difference between your images just on you telling me the time and date when they were taken.
Hey, I am at the end of my night, and so I've got to do paperwork, and there's no way I can do both talk and listen and whatnot, so I've got to jump.
Thanks for talking.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Hopefully I was clear when I needed to be, and not too...
No, you weren't.
I said when I needed to be. I needed to be. So yeah, everybody here, thanks for your interaction, and we'll see you next time around.
So Travis, I got one question before you leave.
Okay.
What did you get? Did you get more questions than answers out of all them pictures?
I got more amazement. I would say that Maxwell. I got more amazement.
That's usually get more questions than you do answers.
I suppose that's possible. All right, guys. We'll catch you later.
Take it easy.
All right.
Well, that's a few hours of my life I'll never get back.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't live there. I would be there every day, taking a freaking video. Twice a day, actually. Both, probably 3 times a day. Got to get it during the high tide, and then in between, and then the afternoon tide.
I just stayed in here to listen to Barney.
Oh, thank you. That's high praise.
You brown noser.
I just stayed in here so you fuckers wouldn't talk about me.
Who are you again? I must say,
Have a
I'm
good
actually taking quite a liking to the plain truth.
If you can get him to stay civil, you can have good conversations with him. It's when you get a bunch of people jumping at him that he starts acting all, crazy.
Precisely, and like a lot of flat earthers have that problem. Well, that's not a problem. That's actually a normal human behavior. If you are attacked by 10 different sides, you will start being belligerent back, right? That's fine. Like I kind of I wish more people would try to calm them down and talk to them normally. Get more information. Get to how they're thinking. I know that a lot of people see that they're thinking wrong and that they need to be corrected. But like, who cares? I want to know how they're thinking. I want to know which information is missing. I want to know how they're putting it all together, where it's conjecture and where they actually have arguments as bad as they are for what they're for the conclusions that they're making. That's the fun part.
Well, I mean, let's just take a bunch of pictures of something and then jump to a conclusion without any supporting evidence. I mean, it boggles my mind sometimes.
Don't we do it every day, though?
Yeah. How is that different from? How is that different from a standard civilian who has been told that the Earth is round at school, and that it's because ships go around the curve, right?
It doesn't. They're just parroting what they've been taught.
Aren't we?
Yes, we are. But
Well,
I have some. At least I don't know. I like to look into stuff and figure out why things work. That's just the nature of me. I've done it my entire life. If I don't know how something works, and I have to know how it works, you better believe that thing's going to be in a million pieces until I figure out why it works.
Well, isn't there also a whole set of people that do the same, but are inquiring whether or not something is as is? So, kind of like what Barney was saying, where he wants to know why, how they think, and questions they have, and so forth and so forth. Isn't what? How do you say it without making it okay?
Without making it okay?
Yeah. Well, you're here. Well, you'll understand in a second. Isn't what flat earthers do exactly what science says, or exactly what science does on a regular basis? Hear me out.
No.
Yes.
Hang on.
Not 100%.
I didn't say 100%. I didn't say specifically. I didn't say. I made it. It was pretty. Made it clear.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Yes, I agree with you.
The thought of that something isn't as is, or it could be different, or why is it like this, could be under dozens of reasons. And I think the only issue with flat Earth is that this point where they say nuh-uh, the second it doesn't equate with their flat Earth view.
Yes, that goes for some of them, but that for most of those that I actually want to talk to, that's not a problem. I honestly don't see that as a problem. That's just I haven't gotten enough information yet, and what you're saying doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't fit into my worldview. It doesn't fit into my understanding of how the world works, right? So I'm going to say nah. But if I can get them to understand this bit and this bit and this bit and this bit and this bit, then the same thing that happened to you, Sean, I expect will happen to them as well. When all of those bits suddenly come together and start making sense as its own whole, right?
Well, the only issue I see with that, and I didn't think it was an issue, but it is an issue. Who wants the truth? Who wants to understand it?
right?
Well, people want to
People,
make the
people
truth
like
what they want to believe in. That's what it is.
people like Pete and people like LEB are people that I really don't want to talk ever again, because all they do is just cause this disparity in the conversation. All they're doing is obstructing conversation. And Maxwell, I'm sorry to say this, but you are very high on that list of people I don't want to talk to. Right? Tonight you were awesome. You were giving insightful comments and actually participating in the conversation. But on most of the other nights, you just come in derailing the conversation from whatever the topic is. And like I really see you as a huge troll.
Well,
Can
I apologize for that, Barney, but I
you
have a
abstain
very
from
short
that?
fuse. I have a very short fuse when it comes to this flat Earth thinking. Sometimes I apologize.
I know. I'm not blaming you exactly. I'm not trying to demean you or insult you. I'm appealing to you. Like, please let me have the conversations. Don't kill the conversations that I'm having.
I was just going to say
Come on,
pineapple buns on pizza when I came in, but you know.
Yeah, shut up. Anyway, or actually, go ahead, Blue, because I knew you were going to say something.
I think I was just clearing my throat. Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say I'm going to go ahead and end it. Jose is actually live as we speak. I did hear him say he was going to go live. Not sure what the topic is. I haven't gone over there yet. But
his topic is his observations he made today.
Okay. So I'm probably going to bounce over there. But I do appreciate everyone that was here. I appreciate Travis's view because it is a different view. I wish he was a little bit more descriptive in what Aether Band is, rather than it being a placeholder for what he doesn't want to believe. But I do appreciate it, though, because at least he does have something to say besides no and no and no. He thinks he has a start and an end point to this, so that's better than a lot of other people's views on where we live. It's just, how do I say it? It's more. I get. See, here's the thing. I get both sides of this. Where I get Barney's view. I see how he views flat Earth and the conversation. Trust me, and I also see how you see it, Maxwell, Blue, or anybody else who's been frustrated by it. I think mine's a little bit different in the fact that I do have some animosity against it because of the fact that I thought it was flat. But at the same time, I would also expect people to want truth, whether it's the truth about what they know about the globe or the truth about what they thought they knew about flat Earth. There should always be a progression of change. There should always be I was wrong. There should always be I thought it worked this way and it doesn't. And I'm progressively seeing less and less of that, which is worrisome, I guess. I guess the biggest issue would be, are you here to have the conversation? Or are you here to learn what you don't know? Or you don't understand better yet?
I'm here for both. I always learn something from Barney.
Well, of course. Barney's God.
That's slightly scary. People don't trust me on the things that I say. I'm very not picky about talking about the things that I know. I just present my understanding.
Yeah,
I can be wrong. I often am. Go check it for yourself.
Every time every time I talk about gravity, he makes it very clear how wrong he can be when he says it's not.
See, look, I'm going to call Barney. I'm going to call Barney Barry now, because if it wasn't for Barney, I wouldn't know that the Barry effect existed.
I'm really getting tired of the gravity argument too. Wow.
Well, see, this is what it's hard. My advice is going to be different from what I do. So be mind that. Stop talking. Not stop talking. Stop talking to the ones that aren't receptive to what you're saying.
Hey, Sean, I got a question off topic.
Yeah, you robot.
Have you seen it's off topic question for you. Have you seen the YouTube channel Street Beefs?
No.
It's a backyard fighting program in Mississippi.
That sounds stupid.
You should Google it or YouTube it.
Never
Street
once.
Beefs.
Nope.
It's legitimate.
Nope.
It's legitimate fighting.
No.
They have a
It's not legitimate.
they have a cage set up.
It's not legitimate at all.
It's not sanctioned, but it's legitimate.
No, it's not legitimate.
It's pretty good, man.
No.
We got some pretty good characters.
God damn it, see, you did it. All right, I'm gonna get out of here. Anybody got anything they wanted to promote besides Maxwell?
Ken Krokop, Croatia fighter. Woo!
Mirko.
You got anything, Blue?
Yeah, tomorrow I'm going to put out a video explaining to all of our friends out there, both sides of the fence, why a goddamn helicopter doesn't take off and end up in California for no damn good reason. I'm fed up with that shit.
Yeah.
We got people here that can't even multiply the goddamn radius of the Earth times 2 pi to figure out what the friggin' circumference is.
Yeah, I definitely think that there needs to be a grounds, like, it's weird because if you don't understand certain things, how do you just suddenly, like, if you don't understand refraction and the different mirages, how do you make observations and conclusions to those observations? I don't know. I'm gonna get out of here, guys.
Oh, all right.
Like I said, I'm a little tired now. I've been streaming. Damn, almost did a 5-hour stream. Not doing that shit again, or a 4-hour stream. What I want to do, I'm gonna go live tomorrow, and I have an idea. I'm not gonna say it now. Yeah. Stop by tomorrow when I stream, and you guys will find out what my new idea is. Because I think I just came up with a solution to our problems.
Oh.
Till then, all right, guys.
Peace out.
All right, guys. So, like I said, I'm gonna get out of here. I believe it or not, I actually do have a weird idea that may solve both problems. I'm gonna go ahead and reach out to a couple people. And we'll see. We'll see tomorrow, because tomorrow will be the day I'll find out if it's possible. But I want to say thanks to Plain Truth, Travis. I do think that any flat earther willing to actually have a conversation is better than nothing. Better than the crap of nuh-uhs and complete just foolishness when it comes to this flat earth globe debate. One of the things that I wanted to just preface is that, again, our observations, the world we live in, is the same to all of us. It's how we perceive it, really. And again, we can't do that ourselves. We need tools. We need help, so to speak. I mean, any one flat earther who thinks they got it figured out, or group that thinks they got it all figured out without an explanation for why they're observing things differently, it's hearsay, and it's not getting anywhere. Again, I preface, why isn't flat earth questioning flat earth? Why aren't real truthers really truth seeking?
Thank you.